We're up. Okay. Yes, exactly. Well, welcome to the Monday, October 1st, 2012 regular City Council meeting. Begin with appearances. Oh yeah, thank you. Begin. It's not on there. I can't remember to do that.
Oh, it isn't on there. Sorry. It usually is.
Allie, roll call.
Councilmember Debbie Bertlin. Councilmember Jane Brom.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Sarro.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Grady. Councilmember Tana Sen. Deputy Mayor Dan Grouse. Here. Mayor Bruce Bassett.
Here. Thank you. Anything else not on there that's going to surprise me? All right. All right. We begin with appearances. So if anybody would like to speak, this is your opportunity. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address as you begin. We typically don't respond to comments, but we'll be listening, and staff will be taking notes. So with that, we are open for public appearances. Bob, you're shaking your head no. Anyone? All right. This could be a first. We will then close public appearances and move to the consent calendar. That was nice, yeah. Anyone want to pull anything off the consent calendar? Mike, you're on a roll.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. One in a row is enough.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question on the APs, a couple of them.
All right, so we just reduce this to payables only.
APs, payables.
Yeah, so we'll reduce the consent calendar to just payroll?
Payroll.
AP's accounts payable?
Yes.
I'm sorry. The consent calendar consists of payables and payroll. Mike, which did you have a question on?
Payables.
Payables. So consent calendar now consists of payroll only. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar. Sorry,
I
Jane.
said that, Dan. Where's Chip? All right, we'll get this show on the road here eventually. All in favor of accepting the payables, please signify by saying aye. I'm sorry, payroll, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that's taken care of. We move to payables. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question on set 1, page 10. We've got a lot of overpayments on the water fund. I don't remember ever seeing that. Does that have something to do with the new meters or the corrected meter reader?
No, I believe Francie has an answer for that.
Excellent.
Those are standard, and you should see them periodically. That is a payment we make to return to a customer when they've overpaid on their account.
How do they overpay? I know they write a check bigger than they need to, but
yeah, sometimes it's an accident. They may double charge their bank account, and then we'll refund one of those payments. Sometimes when it's the end of the account, they're changing ownership, that can result in an overpayment and a refund.
okay. Thank you, Francine. The other question I have, kind of along the same, is the community center. Of course, the community center was had that unexpected expense for the $35,000 on the water meter.
Yes.
So is that
It's electrical meter.
or electrical? Okay, sorry. So I mean, that's an unbudgeted expense. Obviously, does that mean something isn't being fulfilled that was budgeted? Or?
I'm almost sure the answer to that is no. There's nothing that's not happening as a result of that. I think Chip had programmed or set aside dollars to pay that bill some time ago when we knew it was coming. We didn't know by how much, but he had dollars set aside. I mean, if you know exactly what the source was, that would help.
Hi, LaWan Tuttle, Accounting Manager. I know that CHIP has some funds set aside in general government,
it was incorrectly charged to the community center, which is what you're seeing on that AP report, and that's just a clerical error that we will correct. It should have come out of a general government code where CHIP has the money set aside to handle that.
That crystal ball of his, boy.
We knew it was coming, so.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve payables for 9/19/12.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. We move to regular business. Agenda Bill 4772, Island Crest Park Infield Turf Project Bid Award and Interlocal Agreement. Bruce, welcome. And Jason.
For the record, Bruce Fletcher, Director of Parks and Recreation. With great excitement, we bring forward the new Island Crest Park Infield Synthetic Turf Bid Award, and also an interlocal between the Mercer Island School District to help us accept the $25,000 towards this field project. We've been talking about this project for quite some time. It's a department priority, and this is a well-used field, and we've discussed it, for ever since I've been here as your director. But before that even, it was on the ballot in 2008 for a bond to get this thing done, and unfortunately that didn't pass. So it's been a priority for quite a while here on the island. So many of you who have been past and present Parks and Rec Council subcommittee members have also been talking about this, so this is something that you've heard about. The new turf infield means a couple things, but it really means no more rainouts. So the missed games or missed practices, those will be a thing of the past. Also, it'll improve player safety. Those bad bounces that come up with a synthetic turf like that pretty much does not happen. The park superintendent and I have had countless meetings with a couple and discussions with a couple of community members who also represent the Mercer Island Booster Club. And their names were Pete Higgins and Jerry Goldberg. Those are two dads who've invested a lot of time, effort, and now money. We've been working together from the start on the vision, the funding, and design and construction phase. So I'd like to invite Pete and Jerry to come on up and say a few words, and I've been told they might even have a big check.
Oh.
Well, I'm Pete Higgins, and I'm the president of the Baseball Booster Club on the island. And I think Bruce said he comes here with great excitement, and I just want to echo that. And by the way, this is Jerry Goldberg, who's been one of the spearheads of this project for the last 2 or 3 years, and as he said, it's been going on a lot longer than that. This is very exciting because it's just a big step forward for not only high school baseball, but all of the people that use Island Crest Park. You know, in the high school realm, it's become an incredible competitive disadvantage to basically not get to practice before our games happen every spring. There have been injuries. Kids have missed games and so forth. We'll be presenting a big check on 2 dimensions, in size and in dollars, in a few moments. That I think the important thing to understand is it comes from a pretty broad base of people on the island. There were 36 families that directly contributed to this, and that doesn't count the other members of the Baseball Booster Club, which took money from its reserves to put in there, as well as the Mercer Island Boys and Girls Club contributed a check to this project, and obviously the school district counted separately, also enthusiastically supported this. So it really is great to see the citizens coming together supporting the baseball program. And I should add, there are people like Jerry who will never get to see his son play on turf, and there are families whose children are still playing Little League and aspire to do that someday. So that's terrific. The other thing about this project I really want to underscore from our perspective is what a terrific partnership it's been. I've been working on this directly for the last 3 years, as has Jerry. And we've worked with Bruce and Jason Kintner, who's sitting over there, all that time, and it's really been remarkable for a public-private partnership. And their level of professionalism, how thoughtful they are, incredibly cooperative, and really very nimble. This thing has moved very rapidly, and we've, I think, done some really nice work to put a really good solution forward. So I really want to underscore their contribution and thank them publicly for the work they've done, I think, for all the users of the field, and particularly the high school baseball team. I think this has been a fabulous model. I mean, obviously, this group body was part of the work done at South Mercer on the Little League fields and the batting cages, and that's considered an incredible success, and there's terrific enthusiasm for this project among our community, and I think it can be a great model going forward. People are already beginning to talk about, gee, what can we do next with the city? So I think that's fantastic. So it's with great pleasure. I guess, Mr. Mayor, can we ask you to come forward?
Sure.
It's really our pleasure to present the city with a check for $150,000.
Someone's got to get a picture of this.
Last meeting was 25,000.
Yeah, I'm liking
The rainmaker.
Pretty soon it's real money.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to see Fred puts in the envelope.
Actually, should I hold on to that check before you vote? I know where you are. I know where it is. I'm still holding on to the real one that the bank might know what to do with. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for everyone for all their work on this.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I'd like to turn it over to Jason Kittner, who'll be the project manager, and provide some additional details, and then we'll open up for questions. Thank you.
Again, Jason Kittner, Park Superintendent. Just to reiterate what Jerry and Pete said, this project has moved very quickly. If you recall, at the June council mini planning session, we were directed to pursue two different opportunities, one through the Washington Recreation and Conservation Office for grant funding for the South Infield, and then to work with the Friends of Island Crest for the North Infield. We've since heard from the RCO office that our Southfield project was not funded, did not score high enough on the funding list. So we've continued to move forward with the Friends of Island Crest for the North Infield project. As directed, we brought in a landscape architect to design the field. We've gone out to bid, and in the agenda bill in front of you, you have the low bid received for the project. Just a couple notes on the bids. We had a base bid, and then we had 5 approved synthetic turf manufacturers. There's many different types of synthetic turf out there. We had 5 specifically selected for this project. You have to approve the base bid plus one of those synthetic turf manufacturers for this project. Alternate number 4 was the lowest base bid synthetic turf alternative combination, which is before you. We've also included alternates number 9 and 10, which are the most Mercer Island logos for the project. You can see them here in the conceptual mock-up. You can see 3 different base distances. That's 70, 85, and 90. Island Crest is the home of the only 2 regulation full-size baseball fields on the island. So it serves not only just the Mercer Island high school baseball teams, but it also serves a number of other Mercer Island groups as well. We play baseball on Mercer Island from late February through August, and depending on the weather conditions, we have rainouts from February through June, sometimes through the 4th of July. It just sort of depends. This field's very subject to rainouts and poor playability. That's why there's been such a wide variety or wide interest in getting this project funded. A couple of notes about the project. As we've done with our other synthetic turf fields, we will establish a sinking fund for this project. So a part of the user fee will go into the replacement cycle of the turf. The bid required an 8-year manufacturer warranty on the synthetic turf project. So as we've done with the other fields, our first synthetic turf field we put in was the all-weather field at South Mercer. That was completed in 2007. We've been putting in money into the sinking fund every year, and tentatively we're scheduled to replace that turf in 2016 using those sinking fund contributions. We'll do the same thing here. So essentially in year 9 or 10, depending on the use and the playability of the field, will determine sort of when we replace that field at the end of the life cycle. The project at that point will not be a full field installation. It will just be the turf and some minor imperfections in the subgrade. Totally different project, smaller scale. Again, I can't reiterate enough the short timeline we have on this project. Since the June planning session, it's been go, go, go. It's going to continue that. We've been very fortunate with the wonderful fall, summer weather we've had, and we're hoping to take advantage of that as well with excavation and dirt work prior to the heavy rains. We need this field completed by February of 2013. We did this project identical at South Mercer in the same time frame, and we're successful with 3 fields, so we feel that we can definitely get this project done. With that, you have the $150,000 contribution tonight. The Mercer Island School District contributed $25,000. we're looking to we're hoping that you guys approve and authorize us to move forward with this project and continue with this conversion of the north end field. With that, if you have any other questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thanks, Jason. Questions? Ken?
Jason, the interlocal, sure, I understand what the last paragraph means in this agreement, where it's the district's contributing $25,000, quote, in exchange for continued use of the field by the school district. Is that mean that they get to use it for free, or is that, what's implicit in that statement?
Currently, we are not charging the high school fields for use. We run into some complex issues with Title IX as well, with the South Mercer play fields and the high school girls softball team playing down there, making sure that we're equitable both users.
I'm just curious what...
The paragraph of my interpretation, and Katie chime in as well, is that we're not locked into not charging the school district for use of the field, but currently our current practice is we're not charging them for the field.
Does whoever negotiated this with the district, is it clear to them what the district's intention is?
Gary asked to add that just before they sent that over, just simply to say that's our home field. It had never been actually put in the document anywhere, and he just wanted to document it. I don't think there was any more subtlety or intent than that.
So it's clear to you that if we legally could charge them rent, then this agreement doesn't preclude us from doing so?
If we were going to start charging rent, it would be a change in policy. We'd want to communicate that with the school board. It would be a different issue than this.
But, so I asked that...
It doesn't preclude having that discussion.
Okay, so
The intent does not preclude that. It's just, it's an apple and an orange.
Okay.
Should that be reflected in the minutes?
I mean, we can. We're just asking questions at the moment. So I'm curious, Jason, just so I understand that. I don't know where all the rentals, how much the school district uses it versus other users. So in your economic model, you're presumably assuming that the district will not pay anything for its use and that you can fund the entire sinking fund as well as your ongoing maintenance from other users?
Correct. When we looked at the past practice and past uses by the high school, it's relative to about $5,000 in fees comparatively to other user groups where they're in the range of $25,000 to $30,000 in terms of the use. So that sort of correlates how much time they're actually out there.
Okay. And have you advised the user groups what the expected fee will be once this is in place?
We have had conversations with our bug group, the Ballfield user group. They know that this project is coming. They're very supportive of it, and they do know that the synthetic fees will be identical to what's at South Mercer, so they are familiar with it.
And no objections from them?
No objections. There's been nothing but positive support from our Ballfield user group for this project. This field is in desperate need of this playing surface. The biggest issue we have is when you have, you think of a rainout and it's just one rainout, but in reality it's more complex than that because it backs up every other user behind it. We also prioritize games. So if the high school team is rained out on a varsity game or a JV game and they have to make it up, then that bumps all of those other practices from our other users on the field to get those games in. So it bumps everyone, so everyone's very supportive of getting this project done so that it's very standardized.
Okay. Let others?
Okay, anyone else? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jason, dogs, what are we going to do with our dog policy there?
To be determined. That's a topic of conversation and discussion that we would have with the Parks and Rec Subcommittee. This would be the first synthetic field that we would have on a non-school district property. As you know, school district property, dogs are not allowed on school district property, so that would be a topic of discussion, a policy decision that we would have to have.
Okay. Any restrictions on the turf that you selected? Are there any restrictions in the use?
No. In fact, one of the interesting notes was on the conceptual design where the darker terracotta burnt color on the infield, that was originally wanted to go with a lighter color on the infield, but after looking at some other products out there and some other turf fields, the black crumb rubber showed through, and after looking at that, this was the decision that everyone landed on, so everyone seems very happy with the turf product.
I guess the reason I ask that is because they practice football on that field, so you're saying that they can practice football there?
There won't be an issue. The small overlap that the football team has on the infield would not be an issue.
Well, that's not what I was asking. What I was asking is could they practice football on there as an extra?
It would be available to use if needed. There's still, the mound is going to be permanently there, so you have to work around the mound, but it wouldn't pose any problems for that.
Okay. 10%, talk about that 10% contingency. I mean, we've got great experience at South Mercer. It's all above ground. It's very straightforward. Why are we at the standard 10% that we use for the sewer lake line, that we use for all our projects that are certainly much more simple than this?
So, to my knowledge, 10% is the low end of the contingency percentage that we've used.
Well, no, it's not. It's, well, I mean, you have 10%, 50%. 15% is when you dig in the ground. 10% is what we use for everything.
And there is digging here. There's approximately 800 cubic yards of material that has to come out. The 10% I feel is important. We are getting into, although we've had this great weather pattern, we are getting into some crummy weather ahead of us. If we run into issues, unforeseen issues, then that 10% contingency is there to address those issues and keep the project on time. This project is very short. It's a very short window to work in, and we need to make sure this project.
Yeah, but those bids, they know what Seattle weather is, and they know when it was bid, and they know when the contract. So I'm sure that's plugged into their bid as any issues they will have with weather. I mean, that's not something that is going to be a surprise that we're going to begin on October 15th. It's going to start raining cats and dogs. We know
Mike,
that.
Mike, I'm guessing you've gone sort of beyond the question and into the.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll continue. There's maintenance work going on at South Mercer Field. What's that about? Is that tied to this project?
Maintenance at South Mercer Field.
There's maintenance work?
Even though this field will be converted to synthetic turf, there will still be some maintenance that has to happen. Our baseball fields, our softball fields.
Right now, there's maintenance going on right now.
Yeah, so in the fall, this is our time that the parks maintenance crews go out and do those regular maintenance. We still drag those fields. We have the field tested to make sure that the cushion is
No, that's not what I'm talking about. There's a project going on there.
That's
And there's a lot of digging and whatnot going on.
Is that the Verizon project, Jason, you think he's talking about?
The Verizon's at Island,
the other
Island
one.
Crest
Okay.
as well. I'm not sure where you're referring to particularly.
This field, there's,
Well, this is Island Crest.
yeah, I mean, I practice there 3 times a week.
Oh, but you said South Mercer.
Southfield.
I'm sorry, I didn't, I'm sorry, on this field.
Yeah, so we've done the potholing we've done around the perimeter that you've seen out there. That's been our preliminary work that we've done to examine how the drain lines are, what type of shape they're in, how many we have to replace, things like that.
So that's part of this project?
That's part of this project.
Okay.
That was part of our preliminary investigative work that we did to make sure that we knew what we were getting ourselves into.
Okay, how much, so this field will be used from February to September the season. How much labor will that relieve your department?
Quite a bit. It's going to alleviate some operating supplies. We won't have to put drying agents down. The big issue we won't run into, we'll have some overtime savings where we don't have a rain out where we're trying to get a game off and things like that. It's hard to quantify, but there's definitely some savings here.
I mean, whenever there's a game scheduled, and let's say it's kind of rainy, are you putting 2 folks on there or one person?
It depends on how many games there are. It could be as little as 1 person. It could be up to 5 or 6.
Really?
It sort of depends on the circumstances, what type of game it is, what the weather pattern's been, things like that. What I can tell you is the South Mercer project has been unbelievably successful. We haven't had rainouts that we've called ahead of time on those fields. It's always been due to snow in March where they can't play in the snow, or thunder or lightning has rolled through in the middle of a game, or it's been raining cats and dogs where the umpire just doesn't want to sit out there and he calls it for that reason. But it's never been from our standpoint because the field's unplayable. Converting those fields to synthetic turf has made that field playable where people from the other schools want to come play here because they can't get on their own fields. The high school baseball team last year in the spring, when they can't get on Island Crest to take infield practice, we moved them down to South Mercer because those were the fields that they could play on. So it's been unbelievable, the success that we've had down there.
Okay, if I may ask Pete and Jerry, as representative of the baseball community, is there anything in the design of this that you're not happy with?
Not at all.
Okay.
We've worked with Jason and Bruce and met with the contractors and the design folks all the way through, and they did everything we wanted to get done.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Mike?
Thanks for your presentation, and thanks for the public input on the presentation. A couple questions on the users. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Who are the other people that, or other groups that would be contributing toward the sinking fund?
The Boys and Girls Club, they have a huge Little League program. We have other
What from the Boys and Girls Club? Are there camps that would then use the infield during the summertime?
camps, baseball teams, the Mercer Island. There's a number of, the baseball community is growing, and Pete and Jerry can attest to this. It's growing exponentially where the teams are looking for fields, and there's not enough fields out there to be used. So it's, if Meryl was here, she could answer them in a heartbeat because she deals with every single one of them.
Fine.
But it's a number of Mercer Island groups. The Boys and Girls Club is a big supplier of that,
Right.
the smaller kids.
And how about, similar to the use of the turf field near the middle school, any off-island groups that would contribute toward the sinking fund?
We do get some off-island groups. We schedule based on priority, based off of our bug members. So our bug members get first shot at all the fields, and they take a lot of those fields up. So whatever fields are left, then we do get some off-island groups that come in that contribute to those fees. But I will say the majority of our field users are bug members.
Okay. The lighting project that we set aside city funds for a number of years, what is going to happen with that? And where are we going to come up with the money to make that budget whole?
So we've had, during this process, we had a report done by an electrical engineering firm back in 2005. I got back in touch with that electrical engineering firm and had discussions with them, as well as Musco Lighting, who supplies our lighting needs for the fields. Mm-hmm. They informed us that the lighting technology has improved on sport fields, but it hasn't gotten to, they're close on the LED fixtures and things like that where you're going to see bigger savings. Right. So with that, we had our poles tested, because we do have wood poles at Island Crest Park, to make sure there was no decay. They came back in excellent condition. So we've proposed to delay the light project replacement until 2015, when hopefully the LED technology will come around and we get a better use of our dollar for those fixtures, and we will continue to look at other grant opportunities to help supply that CIP project. But it is in the CIP 6-year plan that
Right.
you'll see.
So if you had a guesstimate using LED lights, what would the cost be in comparison to the money we budgeted here?
In terms of savings,
Right.
I'd have to go put pen to paper on that, because the LED fixtures haven't actually come out yet. They're on the cutting edge for the sporting light technology, so it's not necessarily attainable. We can, talking with Fred Gu, we do have a plan in place on the current technology as we were looking for the replacement this year, where we would have seen some savings, but talking with the electrical engineer and the guys in the lighting business, that LED is going to be the bigger step in a couple years.
Last question, when we, refresh my memory, when we did the infields at South Mercer, did we have city funds to help capitalize those projects?
Yes.
And do you remember how much?
Francie, do you remember off the top of your head? I don't remember off the top of my head.
Those fields, if you remember, Mike, those fields were paid for by bonds that we issued and paid off by the park levy that passed. And so it was 100% publicly funded to get the fields in there, and then on the presumption that their replacement will be through user fees.
So where are we now with the sinking funds for South Mercer that also include the soccer turf field?
So, refresh my memory, Francie, when I'm going to give a ballpark number. After going through the budget process and looking at it, we're looking at the replacement in 2016, and at that point we'll have approximately just over $500,000 towards the replacement of that synthetic turf. I believe it's like 540 or 548,000. I'm getting ahead.
That includes the soccer field? How about
That is the soccer field. So that's just the soccer field. That's the multi-use soccer, football, lacrosse. The 3 infields will be replaced at a later point in time because they're on a different replacement cycle.
Okay, good, thanks. And then last question, it gets to Mike's question earlier. In addition to baseball and some of the camps that I'm familiar with that use that space, can you pull off the mound and use it for lacrosse or football or other sports?
Haven't thought about that, to be honest. The mound is dirt, so in theory you could remove the mound and place something else out there. We'd have to look at whether or not it's cost effective because the mound it's a different type of clay and things like that, but it's definitely something we could look into doing.
Good, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Jane, anything? All right. I'll make a comment/question. I was playing soccer on a turf field someplace, which was a combined soccer baseball field, and there was a mound lying off to the side. So one option, I guess, is to do a structural mound that actually gets carted out onto the field, put in place, and taken away, leaving you with a flat surface. Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll bring it back to council for discussion. Thank you, Jason, and don't go far. I'm sure we'll probably be back to you again. So, Debbie.
School district to accept a one-time amount of $25,000 to be used for the Island Crest infield turf project.
Second.
Okay, discussion of that. This is the check we got the other day at the joint meeting. No discussion.
Well, I'm still perplexed a little bit by what that language means at the end of that paragraph, what it obligates the city to do, and because it doesn't have any qualifying language on how much time we're agreeing to give the district on the field and at what rates we're agreeing, and it's sort of, obviously I don't have an objection to the status quo, but I'm a little bit nervous, Katie, as to 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if the district walks in and says, well, we're going to double our usage time, what this paragraph might restrict us in terms of discussing that with them.
I don't think that it would restrict us. I know in part why they do the MOU is simply for purposes of explaining their public benefit and why they would be giving another entity monies for such a ball field. And we've all been we work with the school district so carefully and so frequently that we've been, both sides try to be really careful whenever there's any exchange of funds from the city to the school district, such as in the Mary Waite pool. And this is what I understood on the return back, that it was just their presentation of public benefit. I don't think it would restrict us as long as we continue to have our rules with regard to use of the field. This is more for us to receive the documents.
No, I understand.
Okay. I think Katie described it exactly right. I think Gary just wanted something in a document that he could point to some future questioner why $25,000 was spent. And it's because they get to call that their home field. They get to use it as their home field without any discussion or suggestion that there's anything but status quo expectations on use.
Okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Very well. All in favor of that motion, I won't read it all again, to signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Very well. Anyone care to make another motion?
I would.
Have at it.
I move to award the Island Crest Park infield turf project base bid plus alternative bid items 4, 9, and 10 to Premier Field Development in the amount of $249,725.55 to set the total project budget at $353,572 and direct the city manager to execute the construction contract.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I would offer an amendment.
Okay.
To add at the end of it, and also to reaffirm city policy that rental rates must be sufficient to create a sinking fund that will have enough in it to replace the field at the end of the 8-year useful life.
Second that.
All right, I got the first 10 words or so. Also to reaffirm.
And also reaffirm city policy
that
rental rates must be sufficient to create a sinking fund that will have enough money in it to replace the field at the end of the 8-year useful life.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for, or we have a motion and a second for the amendment. Discussion on the amendment.
Let me just speak to the amendment very simply. It just, I mean, we have had this discussion ever since the South Mercer project, and council has been very clear. This is now the third project we've done. Every time we reaffirm, we make sure there's no question about what the city's policy is in this regard. I know Jason said that this is in fact their intention, and I was very glad to hear that it's the intention, but I think it's important that when people look back at the history and ask why we're charging the rental rates we're charging, there'll be very specific guidance to staff that they can point to and say, council, this is council policy, and we need to make sure we have a sinking fund sufficient to replace this, so there's no surprises for whoever's sitting up here 8 years from now when they get told they need to replace this field.
I'd like to ask, Bruce, is 8 years a reasonable, is that the good year, or are we?
8 years is good because that's the warranty. Typically, though, if the field still has a couple years left, we can continue collecting the sinking fund, but that's fine.
Don?
And again, just to reiterate, you're comfortable that the fees will indeed cover that? I'm seeing nodding.
Mike?
Dan, thanks for adding that amendment. You stole one of my lines. A couple things that I'm concerned with and want to mention so that the public and staff hear it. And that is getting back to the user fee issue. Having been a coach here for many a year, I don't mind asking parents to pay more for the Boys and Girls Club or other projects, but it really makes it helpful for me as a coach and a parent to know where that money's going. So I think the more we can be explicit with the Boys and Girls Club and the other user groups, we need to get that word out quickly. And also getting back to the earlier question that I had about the mound, the more you can expand that use to other sports, like lacrosse, for instance, which is always looking for other space, particularly in the wintertime when no one's playing baseball, we should really look into that. And that way you get year-round use of the facility. I'm concerned about the lighting fixtures, and I remembered hearing the report on the poles, and that's great. But yeah, you know, hang in there for the LED technology, because that should bring the cost down, and the viability of those fixtures is much stronger. But again, you know, we've got to keep that in the budget, and we're pulling $178,000 of taxpayer dollars out of that in order to get this going. So that's a gap we're going to have to fill, and I'm not quite sure where that money is going to come from. So we may need your help in providing funding for that project, and then some form of O&M for that, as well as the fields. So my key issues are multiple users year-round, making sure we've got the lighting fixture stuff nailed, and making sure that the policies in relation to rental use and fees are consistent with what we're doing at the community center, the South Mercer, and the soccer field next to the middle school. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Other discussion on the amendment?
Not on the amendment.
Okay. Then we are at a vote on the amendment, and the motion is to add and also to reaffirm city policy that rental rates must be sufficient to create a sinking fund that will have enough money in it to replace the field at the end of its 8-year useful life. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. Rich, you want to speak now?
After you've done the...
After we do the rest of it. Okay, so we return now to the main motion. Discussion on that.
Do you want to speak to what I was going to say? Or?
Well, I was. If you want to talk about it now, let me just go ahead. Council, I'm aware that some of you are remembering back to June when we talked about this project and pledged a partnership with Boosters. And at the time, we talked about a sort of a match, 50-50 match, about $150,000, and we just got the $150,000 match from the Boosters, and the city's pledging $178,000 on this project budget because of how the bids came in. So what I want to pledge to you, assuming that you do pass the main motion, the staff will manage this project in every way we possibly can to recoup as much of that $28,000 increment as we possibly can, and try and be as true to what you asked us to do back in June. The bids came in as the way they did, and I can understand how you might feel like, well, we got a clock ticking here, and to back up and try and rebid or do something different is almost an impossibility given the timing of this project. So I understand how you might think that way, and I do pledge that we'll try and recoup every bit of that $28,000 if we can.
Well, having heard that, I'd like to make an amendment.
Now, you wish you hadn't said that.
Yep,
don't
yep.
you? Go ahead, Mike.
So having heard that, I'd like to make an amendment, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to add to the main motion.
Just to be clear, this would be at the end of the amendment that we just added?
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you put it.
All right.
Okay, so I would like to move that we do not add the 1% arts fee for $363.50 and change the 10% contingency to a 5% contingency, decreasing the contingency by $13,635.
All right, so Mike, I caught, do not add the 1% arts fee for, and I didn't,
and decrease the contingency fee to 5%, or $13,635.
Sorry, and the number was 513. What did you say, Mike?
$13,635.
Okay. So we had an amendment offered. Is there a second?
I'll second it just for the purpose of discussion.
Very well.
Excellent.
We have an amendment and a second.
Thank you, Council.
Mike, you offered it. You get to speak to it. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Grady. I appreciate that. The Arts Fund is sitting on over $350,000, in that this project needs to save $28,000. Mr. City Manager, you said we're hoping to save $28,000 approximately.
If we were to be in a 50-50 match with the Boosters, the city would spend $28,000 less than it's currently proposed.
Okay, so I'm looking for low fruit on this project to help us attain that objective. The Arts Fund is like I said, it's sitting on $350,000 that it doesn't have this 1%. I don't think it's going to hurt it too much. And the contingency fund, you know, the contingency fund, the sewer lake line was 10%. The generator that we had, or the well project, was 10%. Help me with some others. Island Crest Way was 10%. I mean, all of those projects are far more. Actually, Island Crest Way was 9%. Island Crest Way was 9%. All those projects are far more complicated than this, which we have experienced. It's a shake and bake project, and I think 5% is a realistic contingency figure that our staff can certainly manage.
Okay, other discussion. Tana?
Looking at this amendment from a point of view of policy, I think it seems like, well, it might not be an official policy that we put in a 10% contingency for contingency because we don't know what's going to happen. So, of course, even if we always bid them out, we always get the bids, but we put in a contingency for those unforeseen things. So on that and the 1% Arts Fund, we have that in there for a reason, and I wouldn't want to see that removed from any project, because once we do that, then we would just be going back to that idea.
And I'll just interrupt for a second, because you just made a point I was about to make. Because you'd be violating your own ordinance if you failed to include the 1% for the arts fund. I think we'd have to do a different procedure in order to waive it for this project. So just wanted you to all keep that in mind.
Why wouldn't my amendment, if it's passed by the council, that's the council amending a policy? We do that all the time.
It's not a policy. You have an ordinance that requires 1% for the arts.
If we change ordinances all the time with the vote of the
Ordinance, apparently. Rich, you're dying to weigh in here.
Well, yeah, I'll let Katie and the council deal with the 1% for arts ordinance, but the contingency, the project contingency, frankly, I think it would be terrible practice for the city council to try and manage that line item or any of these project management line items. That's what we do. That's what staff does. We have a lot of expertise. We do that. And on that particular one, if we don't spend the contingency because we don't need it, it goes right back to the fund from which it came. So cutting it now doesn't do anything. We spend it only if we need it, because we'll get a change order or some site condition that requires us to do it. If you cut it now and we do need it, then the project has to stop. We have to come back in here and convince you to up the contingency. And then the council's in the project micromanagement business. This is not the right way to do business. I'm sorry.
We're experts on roads. Why can't we be experts on fields? Okay, other comment. Tana?
Yeah. On the issue of the 1%, is there a way to designate the Mercer Island logo and Islanders name as artistic and have it be an artistic function, or is that making a decision for the Arts Council in advance?
Well, I'll try to weigh in, but ultimately the council allocates the dollars from the Municipal Arts Fund. You get advice from the Arts Council when that happens, and I think that's the right process, because when the council itself starts to get in and makes its own arts decisions, this one might be fairly easy. The next time it's a controversial piece of art, it's probably not going to go as easy. But, I don't know. Katie?
We'd have to go back and take a look at it, but I think again, because there's a procedure laid out in ordinance that how that comes about, I mean, that could very well be the recommendation, and we could come back and bring that back to you. But I think at this point, we don't designate where the 1% for the arts goes. We just allow it to go in the fund and then move it through in that fashion.
Well, normally the process is the Arts Council comes to the City Council and asks us to approve the use of the 1%. So presumably, if we wanted to, for example, change the funding sources on this to take the 2727 and just flip it right around and say that 2727 of the funding source comes back from the Arts Fund, so we put the money in and take the money right back out again and use it for what Tana suggested, that would seem to be an appropriate exercise of council power.
We have to go back and look at the ordinance right now. I can go back and take a quick look at it if you'd like, but I think I'd like to look at it first before I
got to believe also, if you asked your city council liaison to the Arts Council to go...
She's looking a little tense over here.
To go back and talk to the Arts Council about this, you might be able to work this out easily.
Could do that.
All right, Debbie.
I very much respect the principle of bringing up the fact that this is approximately $28,000 over what we principally agreed to at the mini retreat. But I also look at the track record that the city has had in terms of bringing projects in on time, generally on budget, if not even occasionally under budget. I look at the amount that we're talking about. I would ask if we couldn't perhaps raise the user fees slightly in the event that we do have a contingency. But at this point, I have confidence in the professionalism of the Parks Department, the city. I'm hoping for some more good weather, because I know that's greedy, but still going to do so. And I think let's move this one through and get the baseball team on the field.
Amen.
Okay. So we
need to vote.
Yeah, we need to get the amendment voted on. So at this point, I think we've ended discussion on the amendment, and the amendment is, so I'm going to ask for a vote on this. Do not add the 1% arts fee for $2,727 and decrease the contingency fee to 5%, or $13,635 degrees. The 5% of the project fee, or $13,635. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Aye.
Okay, that fails. We return to the original motion with the amendment that passed. So further discussion on that. Fire away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have, I'm happy for this field for two reasons. One is that we're getting an all-weather field for the baseball team who often get rained out. But there's another reason why I'm happy on this. And Councilmember Gray, I don't mean to affront you on this, but it's for that light project. I'm glad that light project got derailed, because we were leaning forward on spending a lot of money on replacing a lot of poles that we came to find out were perfectly good. And so I'll use the light. There are several, I dare say, many examples on projects in the name of sustainability that really have not penciled out in our wake here on the council. I think this is an example of a project that was going forward until we could find a more popular thing to do with those funds, and that those future projects, are truly evaluated on their ability to save the city money, and to be very conscientious about destroying things for a nominal improvement of savings. That's all I have.
So when I drive across, I'm going to respond to this one a little bit. When I drive across the I-90 bridge coming towards Mercer Island, many nights I can spot those lights shining at that park. And that reminds me that lighting situation, and I'm sure Bruce will probably contradict me on this for some other reason, but my understanding of that project was that it was an effort to get better, more even, less spilled lighting on those fields, and that this was a result of, like at the South End field, having sort of horribly uneven lighting down there. And so I hear your...
What was first brief was that the poles were degraded and we needed to replace the poles. You still have the fact of penciling out a project on light, for instance, on light savings. I'm not so much against putting different lights on there if they'll pencil out and saving the community money, and put some externality factor in there for glare, etc. But replacing all those poles would be very, very expensive for the community.
Agreed. There's no need to do work that's not needed, but there are other quality issues there. So. And so on this main motion, I want to come back to this question that Mike raised of what's the feasibility? Can you answer, or are we just turning this into disaster if we talk about trying to turn that into a removable mound and give that field greater flexibility for other users?
I'll give it a try. Well, like South Mercer playfields, there are removable mounds. That's what we have.
Oh, we do, okay.
And so it can be done. If you ask the baseball experts, they want to pitch off on the dirt. If it's a matter of coming in, taking the dirt away, and putting something down during the winter, that can be done too, but at an expense. So it can be done.
Okay, so so rather than having a removal or a mound as we have at the south end, or having a clay mound as is proposed, you're saying there's another alternative, or what you're saying is the clay mound could actually just be shaved off and a piece of turf could be put in?
You remove correct.
Okay. Mike, did you have you're going to help me out here with trying to...
Well, yeah.
If one of you would like to step to the microphone to give us a expert answer on this, I'd love to hear it. Well, we're trying to understand whether before this is, done.
And the reason for my inquiry is not, to certainly poke you guys in the eye, because you're to be commended for raising the money, but to spread the rental fees across a larger user base. And, there are needs beyond baseball that can be met that, I think we ought to explore, which we've done in other parks across the landscape here in Mercer Island. So.
A couple of things I would say. There's a difference between a portable mound for Little League Baseball at South Mercer and Kinko High School Baseball at Island Crest Park. I'm not even sure that Kinko would approve of a portable mound to be used. We could look that up. But I know the coaches and the players would not be fond of having a portable mound. They're actually very hard to pitch on accurately. They also, in general, I've pitched on them, my son has pitched on them. They generally have lips in front of them that tend to direct baseballs up into things like foreheads and teeth and so forth to the pitcher. The other thing you'd find is one of the additional revenue sources that we talked about in turfing this field is the tournaments that will be played here during the summer by outside sources that don't rent the field for tournaments because they can't be sure that they can play, and they put out a lot of money, thousands of dollars, to rent a field, bring teams in, and if they think it's a dirt field, they can get rained in anywhere up until August or September. They don't rent the fields. They rent Hartman Park in Redmond, or they rent Bannerwood Park in Bellevue, and so forth and so on. And they would absolutely not rent a field where there was a portable mound for high school level baseball.
Have to ask some questions.
But the concept of taking the dirt away, like Bruce said and Jason said earlier, that's an expense. But as long as that clay and that mound is built back to spec every February leading to March 1, I don't think anybody would have a problem with that.
Yeah,
but the plywood or the portable mounds are very unstable. Again, there's a difference between 8-year-olds and 18-year-olds.
I agree with that in many respects. Having had both. My question, though, is, so when does the high school stop using the Island Park?
The high school season is actually amazingly short. You can't start practicing until March 1st, and it's over on our fields by the second week of May. So it's basically 8 to 10 weeks of use total of the high school. Then the youth field, the youth teams and so forth that are supported by the Boys and Girls Club that they were mentioning earlier, generally start playing through August after that.
Until when? Until November?
No, probably till the end of July.
Okay.
So beginning of August.
So what I'm trying to understand that is who from, say, September until February uses that field?
September and October, if we have this kind of weather, you have fall ball teams. There are fall ball teams out there that continue to use it for sure. If like I said, if there's decent weather. Other than that, it's individual. I mean, I live 2 blocks away from the field, and I see dads and sons and daughters playing individually in a non-organized fashion, up until the rain starts any day now.
Yeah. So see, that's what I'm getting at is so we've got an opportunity with this turfing of this field to then expand the uses to roughly October until February.
Yeah, and again, like I said, if the plan was to remove the dirt and clay and replace it with dirt and clay every spring, I have no idea how much that costs.
It can't be that. That's not rocket
We
science.
could, there's a, in every season going into baseball season, there's a piece of rebuilding a mound that happens every year. There's bricks that go in, there's new clay, there's new forming that happens. So we already have the expertise on the park crew that does that. We can come back with some easy numbers at another point, but it's definitely within our realm of possibilities.
Well, in particular, doing a cost benefit of, okay, so you've now expanded the use to 4 months, potentially, to other users that have sports year-round. And I think of two in particular, soccer and lacrosse, that could then access that landscape. And
For practice only?
Yeah.
It's not big enough for anything but practice? Okay. The other thing I would say, and this was in some of our original work, this is will be an unusual field. If you go around our league, we play all our away games during the day because nobody who has turf has lights. And so it's an unusual combination for people, I guess, had an either-or decision to make at some point.
Right.
So the fall baseball does go through October, and so that will be in our business. We did a business plan 2-3 years ago. At one point, we were going to talk about turfing the whole thing, and additional opportunities for users that we don't currently get on the island was a good revenue source.
Oh, I know, because one of my older sons played fall ball, but we had to go over to Issaquah in order to do it. So.
Right. Yeah.
And same with lacrosse and soccer.
Okay, I think we've beaten this one senseless. Thank you, gentlemen. Other discussion on the main motion?
I just want to say, I think this is a good example of citizens, Park and Rec Department, the city, the ball field users group, the baseball parents, your group, Pete and Jerry, of cooperating to get something done. And I know you said it's gone very quickly, but I've also heard that this has been kind of talked about for years. So it's high time, and I'm very happy to support this.
Others? No, I'll echo that. I thank you very much to you and to the 36 other families and others who contributed to this. It's a great testament to the involvement of Islanders and to your group, so thank you very much for that. Okay, we are at the vote. So all those in favor of authorizing the city manager to sign the interlocal agreement, awarding the Island Crest Park infield turf project, base bid plus alternate bid, items 4, 9, and 10 to Premier Field Development in the amount of $249,725.55. Set the total project budget at $353,572 and direct the city manager to execute the construction contract, and also to reaffirm city policy that rental rates must be sufficient to create a sinking fund that will have enough money in it to replace the field at the end of its 8-year useful life. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries. We are done on that. Yes, thank you. Mike says we're taking a break here for 5 minutes, so... All right. It wasn't you, Jane.
sorry, hold on. Cue video.
Or 12, or 17.
Okay, we're back. And we move to Agenda Bill 4771, Gulstad Settlement Agreement, Easement and Release. And Scott?
I'm actually going to jump in before Scott gets started
away.
because I have spoken to at least 4 of you today, and I know there's at least 5 of you that have had communications with the Gulstad or know them in some fashion or the other, or are their neighbor. I've told all those of you I've spoken with directly that this isn't an issue with the appearance of fairness doctrine, but even if it were, the state law provides that because we would lose a quorum if you all said, hey, I can't vote on this because of my contact with the Gulstads, then we would not be able to come to resolution on it. So I think what we should do is that if you have not had communication with the Gulstads or don't know them, you can go ahead and alert us to that, if that gives you a comfort factor, we'll assume the rest of you do, but I can assure you that this would be appropriate for you all to vote on. And it's essentially a legislative action because we're asking you to relinquish a portion of an easement. So hopefully that reassures everybody. So is there anybody who has not had any contact with the Gulstads? And Mike Grady wins. And
I have not had contact with the Gulstads. I know who Carol is, and I'm acquainted, and I read her blog, and that's it.
Okay. So.
Okay, Katie, but you are comfortable that we are on sound footing here despite knowing them?
I am very comfortable.
Very good. Okay, we will proceed. Thank you for that. Scott?
Interim city attorney this summer. This is a leftover project that took a while to resolve. It's also a rather unique one. First thing, probably the best place to start is to be really clear that we're not asking that you waive or negotiate any of your provisions of your city code. This is about the property line and the property ownership. The Gulstads, the residents at the top of the picture, built a deck in 2007 and were cited with a number of violations of the zoning code. The one that we'll be dealing with tonight is a provision that prohibits construction in and over a city easement. Now, the reason this is a practical solution that I recommend to you is there's nothing in the easement as it passes under the deck area. The line is actually on the Gulstad's rental property, which is toward the bottom of the screen, the southerly portion. There are small portions of manholes at either side of this picture that are being retained by the city. Another key fact here is the remainder of the violations remain. Excellent. Thank you. The remainder of the violations are not being negotiated. They're under staff discussion now, have to do with things like the height of the deck. Basically, your ordinance prohibits building over an easement. The issue, although the pipe isn't in the easement, is access to it. If you can't get to the pipe to do work on it, it raises the city's costs somewhere down the line. Last fact that I think is important to understand is that this sewer line serves only these two properties. There's no one further downstream that's going to be affected one way or the other. So the basic concept here is to resolve the don't build over the easement is to move the easement. The Gulstads own both properties. In terms of precedent, think of it as if we had a property owner with a city easement across his property who wanted to do a construction on their house and expand it, the city would be amenable to moving the easement as long as it didn't have any significant cost to allow a greater building pad area. The documents that you're being asked to approve do basically 3 things. Resolve a land dispute about the extent of the city's easements, and we do that by simply releasing one and acquiring another to move the line to the south. When and if that line fails in the future, it will be rebuilt to the south. The $5,000 amount for settlement was the original estimate when this concept was first discussed, I think 2008, of relining or putting a liner in the pipe, which you can do from the end, manhole to manhole, without having to dig into the ground. Underneath the deck, and I think you've seen some of the photos, there's a good bit of fill, pilings, a fireplace. It could be, the staff was initially concerned about overburden and the collapse of the pipe. So what we're proposing is a common sense solution, resolve the property line dispute by moving the line. Therefore, they wouldn't be building over the easement. Second point, we're not resolving any of the other building code violations. You're not doing anything to your code. The $5,000 contribution, the city has the discretion to either reline the pipe if you would like to, or simply apply it someday in the future to move the pipe to the south when, as all things do, it fails. Be happy to answer questions. We've got more pictures, if they'd be helpful.
It would help me a lot if you would use the pointer to show me the released area that's described on page 14, the 10 feet by 100 feet.
It runs right along here. There are two 10-foot easements, one on this side of the property line and one on this side of the property line. The actual pipe, though, runs here. It's not located on the northerly track. There's a manhole approximately here and a manhole approximately there, and that straddle the property line. That's the retained portion.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
This seems like a very simple and straightforward solution. Why did it take so long to, I mean, I remember the emails in this thing 6 months ago, maybe even longer, that this thing has been kicking around. Why did we wage war for so long between the Gulstads and the city to get to this point?
Perhaps from my perspective, this is perhaps a new set of eyes.
No, I understand what you did, but maybe it's more for Katie's.
I'll certainly tell it from my perspective. Actually, in part, this sort of solution was not available because previously where it says Gulstead rental property was owned by a neighbor, so we didn't have that option previously. In fact, the city had essentially proposed this solution in 2007, or a similar solution in 2007. We were just asking for some monies to reline the pipe at that point in time. So ultimately, with the additional facts that the Gulsteads did purchase the neighboring property, we've kind of come back to this point. We're able now to move an easement that previously wasn't an option. But I won't say wage war. I think that there were additional other concerns. We were able to segment this piece out and handle it in this fashion, which frees us up to work on the other issues more simply.
And I think that helps explain where the $5,000 came from. That's what it would have cost had this solution been available at the date of the first estimate.
Okay.
Another question. Did the property owners obtain a building permit for the deck and the fence and the fill?
Right, and that permit remains in effect. The staff continues to work on other issues that are not being resolved here.
And they did get building permits for those three things?
They obtained building permits. There are some correction notices pending. Now, these are not scofflaws. The people have been in your process now for quite some time.
Oh, I was not intending to imply anything of the sort.
Okay, Mike.
The $5,000, if we don't line the pipe, it says we can essentially spend it whichever way we feel appropriate. So if we make an assumption...
Per field.
I'm going to fill that $28,000 gap. My question, though, is even though you're moving the line, the easement line, it's still potentially feasible for them to build something or damage the pipe. So $2,008, that seemed to be a reasonable, or $7, that seemed a reasonable cost, but if we had a failure of this pipe, what's the guesstimate in terms of the replacement cost?
Well, at that point, you'd be moving the entire line.
I can jump in because I did talk with our city engineer about this particular issue, and he noted that the pipe's a 50-year-old pipe, that the city, if it was something that had to be moved, we'd obviously bear some expense. He estimated that the removal would be roughly one-third of the cost. I'm sorry, that the $5,000 would be roughly one-third of the cost. I think what he's looking at is doing the slip lining of the pipe so that there's one cohesive piece of pipe rather than the current pipe that has some gaps and crack. And in his view, that was the most reasonable solution because that would, he wouldn't have those different issues. So this is all based on recommendations from the city engineer.
And to take that a step further, you heard the 50-year, it's beyond the normal useful life of that pipe.
We're very familiar with the sewage on this island and in the lake.
Sir.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, Scott.
Yes, sir.
All right, do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Please do.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to approve the settlement agreement between the Golsteds and City of Mercer Island, authorize its execution, accept a utility easement, and approve a release of a portion of a utility easement, and approve recording of these documents.
Second.
Discussion. Okay, well, I just would say thank you, both Katie and Scott, for working on this one. I know it's been, if not a war, at least a saga, and to have at least a partial solution to the thing is nice to see. So thank you for that. All those in favor of approving the settlement agreement between the Golstad and the City of Mercer Island, authorize its execution, accept a utility easement, and approve a release of a portion of the utility easement, and approve recording of these documents, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We are done with that one. Okay, on to Agenda Bill 4754, Utility Assistance to Low-Income Residents. Welcome, Cindy.
Can you hear it, please? Good evening, members of the... We're good? Good, thank you. Cindy Goodwin, Department Director for Youth and Family Services. So tonight I'm going to do a bit of a presentation, a quick one, just to supplement the Agenda Bill 4754 regarding utility assistance for Mercer Island residents. I'd like just to kind of address the issue that came up at the planning retreat in January. I know that there was some discussion about what do we do for islanders experiencing economic difficulty, how are we helping them with utility assistance, is it enough, and is there something more that you could think about as people who think about these issues for city residents. So I'd kind of like to go over a few things for you, walk you through what we do, what we provide, how we think of the services that we do, and then go over that are in the Agenda Bill, 3 options that we considered in what we could do if you'd like to think about doing something further in this area. So the whole goal of utility assistance is really to help families, individuals keep their home, keep their family, keep their health during times of economic difficulty. That's our goal. We kind of work from a strength-based model, very need-focused. The first thing that we do when someone asks for services at Youth and Family Services is they meet with our coordinator. And there's 2 kind of facets to this. The first is, why are they there, and how do we get them back into working? And I want to let you know that that's their first goal, too. They want to go back to work. And something's happened that's disrupt the flow of finances to their family. So that's why they're there. And so we look at what's going on for you, why are you here, and what do you need, and how can we stabilize you during this time? The intake looks at their family, their resources, their expenses, and focuses on if they're there for short term, what's happened with work? They're trying to get back in the market? Do they have the materials they need to go back to work? Do they know how to do search for work, if they've been in the same job for many, many years, like a lot of the people that were recently asked for help over the past 5 years. And then we take a look at what we can offer them in the short term. So we have the listing here, it's in the agenda packet, of so many of the services that we offer them. And these are short term. We also try to hook them up with longer term services, kind of things on maybe a national level. So TANF, food stamps, a lot of organizations outside of the island that can help them a lot more than we can. So we do temporary, and we help them kind of line things up, a lot of case management, and helping them to know where to go. Some people call us. If you look at who we serve, you notice that there were some people who it said non-islanders, and that's because many people will call here, and islanders will call many organizations. So we'll do information referral and let them know where to go, and they're not counted in the unduplicated count, but there are people that are listed as non-islanders, so those are very quick. So part of this, again, is just, you know, why you're here, how can we help you get back, and what can we give you, what can we connect you to that you'll need during this time that you're off. I want to just give you a feel for our clients, because I think that it's just important to know who we have on the island. I think it's sometimes easy to maybe overlook the people that are there. So a portion of our clients are people who are disabled, and by disabled we mean permanently disabled, so some sort of debilitating disease. Think of MS, or thinking of something that's really not going to allow you to go back to work. We have seniors, people who have retired or moved here, lived here their whole life, moved here as an immigrant, live in some kind of housing. A lot of them are on fixed incomes, but food and medical costs and certain things in their lives will continue to go up. So they'll need assistance for utilities and other things too, because if something happens and you live on kind of that margin, something can easily send you over. We have people who are employed, and a portion of people who have kids will be in the service economy. They're very sensitive to changes in the economy, and also their service level wages. So it's harder for them to get by on income. So seasonally, expenses will go up in winter, and they'll ask us for help during that time. They'll take advantage of a lot of the services you saw there. And then unemployed. And I think I alluded to this a little earlier. We have people who are very highly skilled, who have incredible educations, have had incredible experience in the workforce, but a lot of the people who come lost their job after 20 or 30 years. So for them, it was really, how do I get down? How do I learn to look for a job in this type of market? And if they've come to us, they're probably thinking, how do I deal with a house, a mortgage? And so we're giving referrals on how do you talk to your bank? What else can we hook you up with so that you can get through this time? We help them take a look at their assets. How can they use their assets to the best of their ability? Who can they rely on? So it's really a problem-solving process. And I just want to say these clients, and if you've been there, if you're around, they look like us. They are us. They're us one day after losing our job, and they want to be at work more than we want them to be at work. So we really have a wide variety of people coming through for a wide variety of reasons, and so the makeup of our emergency or family services really represents that. Sorry, guys. So utility assistance, and this is on page 2. Just want to point out a couple of the two major distinctions between what we currently do. So the utility reduction program to low-income and seniors on the island is it's to seniors over 62, and it's for people who are permanently disabled. They have a 50% reduction in their utility bill. The average assistance is $300 a year. It's reviewed every 5 years because their situation is unlikely to change, and there are clauses in the agreements that we have with them when they get signed up for utility assistance that if anything changes, you need to let us know and things like that. But their situation is unlikely to change. So that's one group. So if you do have utility assistance from us as a city, you need to be senior or disabled. And then the other is part of our general funds assistance, and those are people on the island who are not in one of those categories. And the former category, the seniors and the disabled, they are people that need also to have an individual meter on their home so that we're able to read their meter and see what their rates are. So if they live in apartments, they're not able to access those funds. For general funds, these are for people out of that category. So people who aren't old enough, they're not disabled, they may have lost their job, they may have kids, they're everybody else. They live in apartments. And people General fund assistance is available to people who come to Youth and Family Services, and it can go toward anything. And of the people that access these funds, 35 of them used it for utility assistance. So it's something that people need help with, in particular in the winter time. Everybody who asks for utility assistance, whether it's a city program or our funds, the $600 a year, it's not adequate. They will have to go to other organizations to piece resources together. And I want to say that that's true for people in any city. It's very hard if you're unemployed or low income to get your needs met at one place. It just doesn't happen. So you have a number of organizations that can help you at different times of years that will help certain populations. Sometimes it's borrowing from family members until other times, but it's really a puzzle. It's really helping people put together pieces of the puzzle. So current utility low-income cost to the city, I just want to review for this. This is, I think, on page, oh no, it is in the page following when we go over the programs on page 2. We have 55 participants in the program. The total is $19,000, close to $700, and it's based on our island of 7,300 utility customers. The general funds, again, they help about 35 people, and the cost for that is $5,900. So right now, as a city, to help people with utilities, we're paying about $25,700, close to that, and all of it in both of those programs. So as you can see, utility assistance is part of a cadre of services that we offer, and the majority of people, it will help, but it won't help completely, but we are able to help. Part of, I know when this came up, it was to learn a little bit more about it and the people that use it, so we could say, is there anything more that we could be doing as a city? So in doing this agenda bill, I met with Francie Lake with the finance department, and we talked about, what are some of the options that we could even look at as a city if we wanted to think, is it adequate, should we be doing something? So we came up with 3 options. One is to change the eligibility requirements, move it from 50 to 70% of the state median. So that would, this is serving more clients. You would get more people in that category if you did get about 10 more people who would be helped by that. You could extend the program to low-income residents, not just seniors and disabled people, and you would probably get about 20 more. 10 of those would be in the first category. Then there's a price tag for each, so you can see what it would cost the city, see how many people it would serve. Or you can increase the current discount, water, sewer, stormwater, from 50 to 75% for the current users, and there would be an increased cost for that. So that's more help to those who are probably the most vulnerable. The people who use that are most vulnerable people, I would say, in our community. And then the third item that we thought about was to consider an annual rebate. And this comes from other cities who do something similar to this. They take a look at the average discount to people who would qualify for a discount. Like for us, it would be $150, $300, and then coming up with something that would be a rebate. And you could base that on people showing that you'd been a resident for the past year and giving you their tax return. So there's some way to document that and make people eligible. And that would get about 44 additional residents on the island. So rebate's positive in the sense that it allows them to determine where their cash assistance is most needed. And again, when you're putting things like this together, you're going through a hard time, it's just a puzzle, and you're really trying to help yourself get through this difficult period. Those are our options. That's where we are. I want to say that when we took a look at these options, we thought they would be a starting point to talk about. And making considerations about how would one think about if you could do something more, how would you do it? Would you serve those that are most vulnerable? Would you try to get more of the people? How could you have the most impact for the money that you have? And this is something people in social welfare research look at all the time. If you have limited resources and you want to help people, what do you do? So we've had this issue a lot. So when we think about it, how can we do the most good? And I'm just going to tell you how we approach this. If you'd like to discuss it, if you'd like to ask any questions and think about it, we're here to do that with you. But I think if we were to look at all of those 3 options, we would consider increasing, it's increasing what we're giving to the most vulnerable people that we're serving right now. So increasing the going from 50 to 75% and giving them that discount. And that's because anything that comes into their lives that upsets the economic cart is really hard felt by them. And if something happens there, they really can slide off. So for us, that we think is the greatest impact that you could have as a city, but there might be something here that we haven't thought of, or there might be something more they'd like to ask about or think about. But that's what we see as, I think that this whole discussion for us pointed us in the direction of we need to reconsider the $600 limit that's been there for a long time. And with this influx in the economy the past 4 or 5 years, it's really pointed to us that number needs to grow. And so we're looking at how when we're looking at can we increase revenues and bring more money to YFS, we will look at can we get that up to $1,000 a family per year. It's still not, it's still going to make it hard to be unemployed and face these economic hard times, but it'll be a little easier. So for us, we'll look at that aspect of it. And that's it. I can answer any questions for you. Those are options that we came up with. Is there any more information that would help you in thinking about it? Does that get at the gist of what you were hoping for when you wanted to take a look at what we're doing with the utility program?
Donna, you want to start?
Just to clarify, which means you have less income, if you're 70% of state median income or if you're 50% of HUD's median for King County?
Okay, so there's two different ways of measuring it. There are two different ways of measuring because the city went with one, and we as a service provider go with the other one. I just want to let you know because that's what the majority of other service providers go with. So we tend to go with the state one. Is that correct, Cheryl? We go with the state, and so which you're saying which is the better one, or where do you get more people? Which is, say the question again, Tom. I'm sorry.
Which one means you have less income?
Okay.
Is it page 2?
Yes. Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I know that off the top of my head.
Criteria.
You do? Okay, good. Cheryl knows that off the top of her head.
Cheryl Manrigas, Family Assistance and Employment Coordinator. I anticipated that question, so I did the math today. If you're a household of 2 and you're looking to be under the 50% King County, you have to earn no more than $34,750. If you are 70% of state for the same number of people, you would be allowed a maximum of $39,276. So the 70% state median is a little more generous than the King County 50%.
The 50% of the King County median income is how HUD, in an urban area, how HUD would determine low income. 80% is what HUD determines as moderate income. And that's where we target most of our housing programs.
So just to follow up on that, so looking at the family assistance chart on Exhibit 1, page 5, all of the other services that you provide use the 70% of state median, but for this one service we use 50?
That's right. And that's a city decision. That's with finance, and I think that they went with that because of the Bellevue and East Side cities went with that. Is that correct? Yeah.
Thank you.
So just so I understand, so there is a statewide number used everywhere, and then there's a small group of cities that have made a decision to use the King County numbers instead.
Yes, and that's new for us. Our first encounter was just the utility program. We used the other figure.
And what would your preference be from, is there a preference from a dealing with numbers standpoint as opposed to, I mean, from a consistency standpoint, would you rather be more consistent with our neighboring cities or consistent with our state?
Our state. And I think actually that we even put that in there in making the suggestions. I believe that we switched it to the one that would make most sense because then they would also qualify for so many other services, and it would make it a lot easier for them in case management. And so I believe it is going to let me see, it's in B, the proposed rate of 70% of the state median. 1B. Hold on, no, I'm sorry, guys. It was 2. I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth. It was 2 is the one that we're recommending. And it was increasing, so that would be staying with what the city uses. We gave recommendations that included moving to what we use, but B would be staying with what we're doing currently, and that's going with what the city uses.
Are these programs, I'll be honest with you, I don't ever remember the council being asked to weigh in on this before. Are these, right now, are these all determined by staff separate from the council, or is there some point that we pass something to tell you to do this, or authorize this, or, I just don't remember ever seeing this before.
Probably two different things. So utility reduction is a program that finance does when they did their utility rates, and that was done a little separately. And I believe that was originally done outside of YFS, so I can let Francie address that.
I think that was an ordinance passed a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to come up unless you have some specific thing, but
is that part of the thing we pass every year, Francie, that's part of that?
Utility rates.
At the end of the year?
And for youth and family services, emergency assistance and family services, those are, we do needs assessments, and so we gauge what we do based on emergent needs in the community. So we'll flex. So those have developed over the years, and they've been around since the 1980s. And that's a cadre of services that are generally provided for low-income clients. So
just so I understand how this would all play itself out, if we showed an interest in 1A, 1B, or 2, then presumably when staff comes to us in December with the utility ordinances, those would be reflected in that. And Chip is saying yes to that.
Yes.
If you chose to increase your annual payments from $600 to $1,000, that doesn't require any council action because that's completely paid for out of donations that you're receiving from the community, and you'll just make that decision without council input, which is fine.
That's right.
And then the third item here, which is offer an annual rebate to low-income residents, that one, that's without a utility meter. If I understand what your presentation of that would be funded out of the general fund or out of YFS funds somehow, so it would not come out of utility funds.
That's
and that presumably would show up as a budget item in whatever we approve at the end of this year. That's
yes.
And is there anything which would preclude us from funding that out of utility funds if we chose to fund it that way?
While Francie's coming up, Cindy mentioned general fund assistance. Don't confuse that with the general fund.
No.
That was YFS funds.
No, it's a 600.
It's just general assistance.
That's not on this list, and the reason it's not on the list because that's a staff decision. You don't need the council to weigh in on whether to go 600, 700, or 1,000.
Why is that?
Well, I'm assuming that.
Within their budget, they have dollars allocated out for general assistance, and the rate at which they give it out, I guess staff can make that call, although this is an issue the council wanted to spend some time on, so I think we want to hear from you what your prerogative.
The only reason I mentioned it because
I just didn't like the logic you use on that. Just because it comes from the Youth and Family Services thrift shop doesn't mean
it comes from donations. She didn't say thrift shop. It comes from separate donations. And it's not one of the 4 options here. Cindy mentioned that they may decide to increase it, but that wasn't one of the 4 she's asking for council input on. So I assume that that's will be made by staff based upon funds available and the need. So back to 3, Francie, is that something that could be paid for out of a utility fund?
I don't think you could. The way we do the discount is by having a separate class of users, and they are true customers of the utility. The customers that Cindy's talking about giving a rebate to would be not direct customers of the utility. I think it would be problematic. Can look at it more, but I'm not very hopeful.
So really the reason for calling it a rebate is just that on the theory that somewhere in the rental payment they're paying, there must be a utility factor, and therefore, effectively, you're rebating part of their rent, which represents what they're paying for utility bills.
Right, and not very direct.
In the end, we're helping with their cash flow needs.
Right,
That's
yeah.
Thank you, Francie.
And just clarification.
Sure.
And again, basically, if you, without an individual meter means a renter, generally?
Yes.
All right, Debbie, and then Mike.
Just a couple quick questions. So if I understand correctly, there's 7,300 utility customers, and roughly this is the equivalent of $4 from every utility customer that's going into supporting and assisting people in challenging times.
Yes. And and those rates are adjusted annually.
Right. I'm just ballpark. The next question I have is, when you talk about the $600 per family or unit at this point, what percentage of the total would you estimate that represents?
Is it 16, or I'm sorry?
What, yeah, total of what?
The total utility bill.
The total that they use, of the people who use it for their utility bill, what percentage of our clients is that?
No, sorry, the 600 represents, is that $600 out of an average 1,500? Okay. I'm being told yes. Approximate 1,500, okay, great. No, that helps.
It has nothing to do with utility bill.
Yeah,
She's talking about general fund
but the
assistance.
The average low income home treatment.
Yes, but the 600 was general funds assistance.
It doesn't have anything to do, it
It's not
could
linked to
be
utility.
used with, for anything. It's not linked to utility.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
Okay. Debbie, you okay?
I'm good.
Okay, Mike.
Thanks, Cindy, for these options. How about Puget Power in terms of their program for eligibility and the amount that they contribute toward utility assistance? Can you put a little light on that, and then compare that to what you think we should be doing on Mercer Island?
You know, I can't. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. I could look into that, and what's available throughout their programs, but I wouldn't be able to draw a comparison. And I can look into that if we'd like to use that as some sort of reference. That would be helpful.
Mike, do you know anything about what?
Well, I don't remember, and that's why I'm asking, because they do have some statutory requirements to provide that, but I can't remember what the
I think
eligibility
they have,
requirements are.
at least they have some sort of way you can set up payment programs if you're getting behind in paying your bills. But in terms of grants or somehow being let off of your obligation, I don't know. They may do something with liens on property so you can kind of do a reverse mortgage. But I don't know. And Cindy is here because at the planning session, the council asked specifically about the city utilities.
I know, but you know, I'm thinking of, you know, individuals that come into your office, they're looking for, you know, to what extent they can, kind of a one-stop shop experience. And to what extent we can partner up with Puget, particularly given that we've just sent them a rather large check recently, I think would be very helpful, not only for their business, but also their PR with us.
Cheryl just said she knows something about Puget. You want to address that?
Okay.
I often refer folks to HopeLink, who is our regional service provider. They have federal funds for LIHEAP, which can provide to eligible parties in addition to what we do. And they also have PSE Help. They are a regional service provider for the funds that come through Puget Sound Energy.
And so LIHEAP is Low-Income Heating Assistance Program, a federal program.
Yes, and that particular program can help more significantly.
Right.
And they can even pay ahead on someone's bill rather than just be able to pay what is owed. So oftentimes when I work with folks, I look at all the resources that they may be eligible for and refer out to all and any that I can think of.
So I guess my advice would be to what extent we can mirror that federal program or others to make it as simple as possible, so there aren't multiple eligibility requirements, would certainly make it easier, I'm sure, for staff and also for people looking for assistance.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Don't go far. And you're looking for direction. We don't have a specific motion this evening.
Yeah.
And so we're really just beginning a conversation here and trying to open this up.
That's exactly what it was. And this is a starting point for discussion. And we can look into a lot of areas. We try to access any funds we can, but if you think as a city that you hear a good idea or you'd like us to look into something, we can go research that too. And if you have a mechanism in mind that you think might help our folks, we can look into that too.
If one of these general approaches is one that the council generally favors, it would be good for you to tell us that now, and we will start to prepare implementing documents and actions to do it during this budget cycle. Because in the end, this is about allocating resources.
Okay, Mike and then Tana.
Well, I like Director Goodwin's recommendation of number 2. It strengthens the safety net, and I think those folks at the 50% are. I mean, every amount helps, and will go directly toward the necessities of life at that level. I'm certainly like of the options. That's the option I like the most.
Tana?
Anticipating an increase in utility rates, how much would it take, what percent increase would it take to keep people having the same amount of income or not spending more than what they're spending now with the rate? Okay, didn't answer well. How much, so if somebody's getting 50% rebate now, but their prices go up, they're still going to be paying more. So what would it cost to keep them paying the same amount of money?
Francie Lake again. For the city utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, if we discounted their rates an additional 8%, that would keep them whole in those elements of the utility bill. Sorry?
I think Tana's question was, what does that translate to into money?
No, 8%.
Okay, never mind.
So at probably about between 3,000 and 4,000.
Tana, you said for the moment?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike?
I like number 2, but my other concern is individuals without utility meters. And instead of getting in the weeds on eligibility, et cetera, I think we also need a program to address those, because many that would be in the situation of having lost their job may have also lost their home, and so now they're renting on, potentially from family members or, other members of the community. So I really do think we need a program that addresses the need for those that don't have an individual meter as well.
John?
Cindy, is the $150 that would be rebated, if you bumped up the $600 minimum to $750, would that be the same thing?
No, the $600 maximum for family assistance can be used in any way that they need. It might be medical bills, it might be utility, it might be rent. There's a variety that they can use it for. So if we did a specific rebate for utility, it would go specifically for that. But that $600 can be used with whatever best suits their family need that year.
Debbie?
I'm just going to echo Councilmember Grady's point, and that is I think that the assistance needs to be somewhat less discriminatory in terms of the type of housing that people have for any variety of circumstance. So I would definitely like to see some move that addresses metered and non-metered residents.
Mike?
I'm not sure I know the answer to this question, so I'll ask it of you.
Normally, you always know the answer. Good attorney.
For the folks at 50 and 75%, depending upon what metric you use, when we raise taxes, property taxes or utility taxes, give us a feel for what happens or what they feel.
Yeah. I'm going to get Cheryl. Cheryl, do you feel like you can address that? Someone, okay. And those are great.
Cheryl Manrigus again. So for some of the folks that are on the utility reduction program, in fact, I specifically looked at this for people who are on that program and have asked for emergency assistance in addition to being on the utility reduction program. 100% of those families have asked for the discounted King County property tax. So they're on that program as well. And part of that is because Betsy Zuber and I have encouraged them to do so because it's another way of reducing their costs. But I think part of it is because they're really looking for what else they can do. So that's one of the reasons we recommended the utility reduction be increased, because they're running out of anything else that they know how to do or any other options that they have for programs.
I guess it was more of a theoretical answer I was looking for. The question was, when we raise taxes for the folks at 50 or 75% HUD or King County, what happens to them when they open up their bill and they see it's for another extra $7 for utilities, or it's another extra $150 for property tax, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, what?
They have to make decisions between, I have had people say to me, I can either pay for my meds, or I can pay for food, or I can either pay for utilities, or I can, let my dog eat this month.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Walk right into this. So just, I understand, people have talked about 2, they've talked about 3. So 1A, 1B, and 2, none of those are not mutually exclusive. You could do all 3 of those if you wanted to. Personally, if I had my pick, I mean, I'm appreciative of what Debbie and Mike Grady have talked to about renters, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that 1A, 1B, and 2 are things that they pay for themselves to some extent because they're worked into the utility rate base, and then we have a ongoing source of funding for that. Number 3 requires a new funding source effectively, and once we have that program, it's very difficult to do anything other than to retain it or to increase it over time. And I fully get it that $6,600 isn't going to break the city of Mercer Island, but my inclination is to come up with programs that we know how to pay for and that we can deal with within the rate base than to start a new program with the attendant administrative costs and the fact that it is almost impossible once you start a program to do anything with it other than to maintain it over time. So if there was a way of paying for this so-called rebate through the utility programs, I would be more supportive of that. But I'd be very happy to do 1A, 1B, and 2, and because I think those would be significant improvements over what we're doing now and would still enable us to provide benefits to a significant number of islanders.
Others? I haven't weighed in myself yet. I talked to Cindy this afternoon a bit. I feel a bit lost in all of this. With many things we work on, we have I think, a much clearer sense of how it sort of ties to our daily existence. And with this one, I have a very hard time getting a real grip on sort of the cost benefit of these things, how each of them would would benefit folks versus another, and you know, we talked, I think one of the tee-ups for this was that we talked about seniors who were house-rich but living on fixed incomes, and how for those, with that sort of situation, you can get a pretty clear sense of the prototypical individual and what their circumstance is. With some of these other folks, I'd asked Cindy, you know, can you give me a little bit more sense, and she's offered some of that. But I guess I still struggle with this question of you know, who the beneficiary is. Have we done as much as we should, as much as we think is the right amount to do, and which of these ways it moves it in the right direction? And I say all that to say I don't know where to go. So I've talked without reaching any conclusions. So Mike, maybe you can offer something more valuable than that.
Well, you know, I feel like we're in a discussion similar when we talked about sustainability, where we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we fund a project which really doesn't have a clear source of revenue? And so some of the suggestions were, you know, set aside a green fund from the savings that you've achieved in various other programs that then will become sustainable over time, and then in turn pay for whatever the programs are. And I feel like in order to address the unmetered issue and many individuals that are renting or in different positions other than having individual meters, we should approach it in a similar vein that, you know, within your program, Cindy, you have various revenue streams. And we're providing some of that, but you're providing the bulk of it. And I think to what extent we can identify a dedicated percent or amount that goes from the thrift store or from the, you know, dedication from the city funds, and go into that dedicated fund just for, you know, this particular program, number 3 or whatever you call it. I think, yeah, it would start a new program, but quite frankly, you know, we start new things all the time. I mean, we just approved a project for crying out loud, almost $400,000 to put turf on a park. And, you know, we contributed $28,000 more than we thought we would. And we hadn't figured out how we're going to find that $28,000. Well, for crying out loud, you know, we're talking about, what, $10,000 here? I think the overall benefit and the need is far greater for that than for some of the other things that we spend a lot of time and spend a lot more money. So I guess I would challenge fellow council members to come up with, you know, other sources of funding, be that through Youth and Family Services or other programs, that we have a dedicated pot that we can point to individuals that get in that particular situation and point to it with pride.
Rich, and then Mike.
I was going to make a suggestion, because it sounds like you guys are groping a little bit for what to package together, so let me throw something out. I think Dan suggested maybe 1, A and B, and 2, and then 3 is sort of this area of uncertainty. Why don't, on 3, proposal, you send us off with direction to expand it to $300 for 6 months to see how many people avail themselves of that, and does it capture more people? Do we spend more money? And in 6 months, we come back and report. And we'll decide whether or not it needs to continue on at that level, or are we running out of money. But I think part of the reason you're groping is you don't understand, you don't have a good feel for who out there needs things. And I don't think you're going to know until you try things. This is a complicated stuff. This is people in lives that are shifting and changing, and this one isn't given to a pretty easy formula. So let's try something and come back and tell you how it went.
Well, can I ask you a question there, Rich? I'm all for doing experiments, as long as I understand going in, you know, what the experiment looks like and what the hypothesis is. And I don't think 6 months is long enough, quite frankly, you know, given what it's going to take to get out of this recession. But I guess to counter that, and I agree with you saying this is the beginning of a long discussion. let's put some thought to it and come back at the next council meeting if we can, or soon, with what that experiment or that test would look like.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I think staff, we're at a point now, staff needs to come back to you with a package, a proposal for you guys to do this with, because we're hearing a lot of, good stuff from you, but you're not going to solve this up here. This is our job to give you something tangible to react to and approve, and I think we can do that. And some of it may be, as you say, is an experiment, and we'll give it a length of time, and we'll have criteria for assessment, and come back.
I do. Please take my suggestions as being just that, to try to help you out. But, pointing to PSE, or Puget Sound Energy, for instance, is an example that, I've worked with in the past for many years, and, they have a resource that we can call upon, both for outreach, which is going to be very important to get the word out and to continue to publicize this, but also, to tap into their funding base, because they're looking for various ways to help local communities, and they have, some opportunities there to help us out. So let's take advantage of that. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, Mike was up, and then Jane, you're up after.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On 3, I kind of, to Councilmember Grouse's point, and also to your statements about all the different programs that are out there, and isn't 3 simply could be addressed by changing the amount of funds in your general fund?
In our general assistance.
In your general assistance?
Yes.
Right. Versus making another silo of program?
Yes, this could be done by us increasing our assistance.
So here again, just another suggestion. To accomplish the same thing, I might ask the staff to consider how could you accomplish the same thing within the structure that you already have, instead of starting a new bucket here. Somebody doesn't have, so.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I'm finding I'm agreeing with Mike tonight a lot. It seems to me that using the term rebate for renters on the utility assistance is really not appropriate or correct. And so I think upping the general assistance, general funds assistance, and not specifying renter or owner, but certainly making it available to renters, because we find that 78% of the people who are looking for assistance are renters.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? I think we've heard that staff will go away and work on this and come back with something more concrete, and
we're going to come back.
Seems like a good idea to me.
We're going to come back with a tight package that with specifics and numbers and a proposal for you to say yes to.
But do we want? Do we already want staff to put 1A, 1B, and/or 2 into the budget bills? This is. We're not going to talk about that again. Hopefully, we got some huge budget stuff to talk about. We've now spent 45 minutes on this topic. We should have enough information to give staff guidance.
I was going to do that. I was going to have them calculate the rates to assume a 1A and 1B.
Well, we should just vote to say whether we want to direct staff to do that, and I guess we can always reverse ourselves in December, but at least we can make that determination now as to whether to tell staff to do that.
All right, you guys comfortable with a Roman vote on this? All right, so 1A, 1B, and 2, okay with you? All right, very well.
And the last piece of it, we'll look at the other facets and come back to you.
We've agreed the last one looks different, but doesn't go anywhere entirely. Okay. Cindy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheryl, thank you.
Short break.
Yeah, I'm guessing short break, and then we're into budget. So,
Cue video.
All right, we're back. And we are moving to Agenda Bill 4773. Hey, what? We're back, and we're moving to Agenda Bill 4773, 2013-2014 preliminary budget presentation and distribution. And we have our faithful city manager here.
Mr. Mayor, Council. Tonight we're doing a bit of a ritual that happens every 2 years. Under Washington law, I am required as your city manager to provide you with a balanced budget in October or prior to an adoption by the end of the year that will set the resources, both revenues and expenditures, for the succeeding year. And in our case, we're a biennial budget city for 2 years. So tonight, you have the budget message presentation. You have in advance a hard copy of the budget message. They're very much the same, but there are a few differences, and you'll see that as we go along. And I'm happy to do this. Before I get into the specifics, I do want to take the time to acknowledge the work of the great work of a whole lot of people. And the core of the budget building process is done with Luan and Francie, as you know, Allie on paper and copying and organizational and graphics, and she did this for me this morning. And then the whole orchestra is conducted by the money man, our finance director, Chip. It's a lot of hard work. They start early in the year, and then it reaches quite a crescendo literally this weekend as they're printing the budget. So thank you all. Great job. I'm going to go through quickly quite a few slides. I don't spend a lot of time on each one, so we'll be moving quickly. Here's our agenda. I'll walk you through the process that we've been through and where we are going in the next 2 months, how the budget is organized, set some context for the biennial budget, reminding you of our priorities of government and what our citizen survey results were. Then we'll jump into the general fund. Most of my presentation is focused on the general fund. We'll finish with a few slides about the utilities and the CIP. Chip will handle the utility section, and Noel will do the CIP, which is one of the things that he is responsible for at the city. Lastly, we'll walk you through the budget hearing schedule, and then we'll give you the document itself, the 2 or 3 inch thick document.
And Rich, from a protocol standpoint, tonight is not the night for us to drill down into this. Tonight is the night for you to present it, and there will be plenty of time after this for us to...
A little over 2 months to go through, review in detail, and then adoption. I think it is fair if you have a question about what is it that you said, a clarifying question to make sure that you understood what was being presented. That's fair. I would urge you not to ask questions about why, or it will start to get you into a debate about the merits one way or the other of the proposal, because that's what the rest of the review process is really about.
All right, we'll hold our tongues.
All right. So we started, as we do in the budget process, we started in March with a CIP kickoff, and then later in June did a similar thing with you on the operating budget. You got a preview of the CIP a couple of days later. In August, which is a little later than we usually do this, you got the results of the citizen survey. Chip then brought you in September the 6-month financial status report, which gives us the best picture that we have up until then of where we are, particularly on revenues. Our dashboard report was at our last council meeting, and that all leads up to tonight, where you actually get the budget. Then for 4 meetings, October 15th, 22nd, November 5th, and 19th, we'll have hearings where you will get to hear presentations, get into the details, and actually hear from your citizens about your preferences on the budget. On November 19th, the last of those 4 We are programming as we always do, the adoption of the ordinance that sets the property tax and the utility rates. And then your overall budget ordinance is then adopted on December 3rd. By the end of the 19th, we expect you to have resolved all of the issues that you have seen so that we can come back and prepare the budget ordinance document to be adopted. It's not going to be one of those nights where you get to do lots of motions and amendments to amendments. Budget, we need it done on the 19th so we can prepare the documents on the 3rd. The operating budget itself is organized around departments. This is a format that we used 2 years ago that you liked, so we're continuing with that. You'll see the base budget and then modifications to the base budget in terms of service reduction proposals or service enhancement requests. In the CIP section, we have each project category that you're familiar with: water, sewer, parks, streets, facilities, and so forth. The projects that are funded and where there are no changes, we don't spend a lot of time on those. Those that are modified, we tell you about. A new project, of course, we will talk more about. The fire station is a great example of that. And when we have a project that is unfunded but in the CIP or is only partially funded, we let you know that. I always try to bring this slide in, even though we don't strictly use the priorities of government process that Hutchinson wrote in his book and Governor Locke put into the state's budget. But the council has endorsed these 6 priorities of government for Mercer Island consistently for it was either 8 or 10 years. And we keep an eye on these priorities as we think through choices that have to be made. I won't say a lot about it, except to say you can't think of these things as being a strict, ordinal kind of set of priorities. They overlap. Of course they do. But in general, the community will be safe as a higher priority than the one below it and the one below that. The fact that number 6 is about open government and democratic decision-making doesn't say it's the lowest priority, we shouldn't do that. It's saying it's a priority in relation to these others that falls towards the bottom. One way of thinking about it is Mercer Island being in the used car sales business is not a priority of government. So number 6 is higher than that. It's kind of a weird example, but I'm trying to make the example, because we've had this before where I've had council members say, well, we don't need to do number 6. We don't need to spend any money on that because it's the lowest priority. All of those things are priorities. That's the point. There are other things that are not priorities and they aren't up there at all. So a little context to the budget from our survey results. This is the right direction, wrong direction question that we ask in each survey, and it tracks very consistently with years past. In fact, the years 2006 and 4 before that had very similar results. About 70% of the citizens think we're on the right track. Then there's the rating, the job ratings of how we have done on each various area of city services, and we get very, very positive results in our parks and crime and recreation and fire and medical aid. So all of these towards the top are very consistent from years past. The areas to keep an eye on as we go through the budget process is around maintaining streets, sidewalks, pedestrian paths, traffic safety, preparation for natural disasters. They're all, in the majority, still positive responses, but it's the fact that the negatives are high enough to get your attention that these are places that we should spend some time working. In the question about what's the biggest or most important problem on the island, as you remember when you saw this before, the new thing that we hadn't ever seen before was education school funding ranked as by more than double the highest issue. Now this came right on the heels of the failure of the school bond, so that's not a surprise. But what it did is it really drove so many of the other issues down. Traffic and transportation still a priority, but quite a bit lower. The next highest number was there are no problems on Mercer Island at 11%. So I guess one way to read that is after the school issues, most of your citizens are pretty satisfied with how things are going, and the areas that come to mind when they're looking for something to work on aren't in really large numbers. When asked about do we have too many services, not enough, 80% say about right, and that's been consistent since 2004. I think that's an important statistic, can be overread too, because if you'd asked the question somewhat differently, you might have got a different kind of response. But generally, most people are satisfied with the package of services the city provides, at least in the quantity. Then we ask the forced trade-off question about taxes and services. In 2008, it was, the majority said they wanted to keep services the same, and if you had to add revenues to do that, they were, at 49%, were comfortable with that. That has shifted a bit to now only 40% say that, 47% say they would see, prefer to see reductions in services in trade-off over taxes. This is, I always try to put into just a couple of bullets what I think is going on in the budget every 2 years. So I call this a maintenance of effort budget. 2 years ago, we were in budget free fall. We had to cut over 10% of the budget, $3 million reductions on a $20 million budget, and it wasn't maintenance of effort at all. It was about reduction of effort. This time, we are constraining our expenses, mostly in the salary and benefit area, and we're starting to see slight increases in sales tax and development-related revenue. We can maintain the level of services that we have been providing and actually make a few small investments in other places. The cuts that we did 2 years ago positioned us very well to get through and go into this next biennium. As I say, we can make just a few small investments in this budget in communications, technology, sustainability, and utility infrastructure. We also think we can demonstrate to Mercer Islanders that they receive high value for the tax dollars that they are providing us. The last point I make is, even with the economy starting to turn around and starting to generate a little bit more revenue, we still have a structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures. We've talked about this several times this year. The city is still overly reliant on the property tax, which is limited at 1% per year. Eventually, the city is going to need a new general fund revenue source for operations, and eventually for transportation, if we maintain the same appetite for transportation investment that we've had over the last 10 years. In terms of this high value, I wanted to re-show a slide that Chip has shown you before. It's just a context thing. When you compare a monthly cost of taxes paid to the city, properties, utility, and sales tax, and all the services that flow from that, and then compare that to the monthly bills of the private utilities that service our residents, we think we compete quite well. And you can see $195 at PSE for a typical gas and electric bill, Verizon cell phone $180, Comcast another $180, and our own utilities, water, sewer, and storm, $121. So for those property taxes, utility taxes, sales taxes, you're getting 24/7 police, fire, EMS, you're getting a park system, you're getting streets maintained. It's a pretty hefty list of services. The budget overall, biggest picture, it's a $24 million expenditure budget in 2013, we expect to bring in just about $24 million in revenues. It's an increase of about 2.2% from 2012 to 2013 in revenue and about 2% on expenses. So we're not growing big in this budget from the current biennium to the next. Again, maintenance of effort. So what are the key budget drivers? On the revenue side, we've got the 1% property tax, a slightly growing sales tax receipts, and I'll show you where that's coming from. Development fees are beginning to go up because we're starting to see more permit activity. And then in this budget, as you'll remember back in June, we have a utility tax proposal. The council said you were willing to consider an increase in the utility tax on the city's utilities, water, sewer, and stormwater, if we could come back with and show that we had reduced the overall projected deficit by about half. And at the time we were talking half of the deficit was about $450,000 in 2013. On the expenditure side, the key drivers are labor costs, and we're doing all we can to manage those while maintaining our mandatory and essential services, trying to find efficiencies where we can. In 2013, I've already laid the groundwork for an initiative, use the euphemism lean, a process of continually improving and looking for efficiencies throughout the organization through process reengineering. We have a history of that from the past, and I want to reinvigorate that for the future. I think we can find real efficiencies, real savings, and real service quality improvements. And then lastly, we will address this general fund deficit that we showed you in June. The property tax. Mercer Island, you've seen this before. Mercer Island is, in comparison to most east side cities, is very disproportionately dependent on the property tax. We are a bedroom community. Most of these other communities have much larger sales tax bases with shopping malls and multiple vibrant shopping districts. We don't exactly have that. All of the jurisdictions rely on the utility tax, mostly on the private utilities, but not exclusively, as you'll see in a minute. It's not uncommon to also rely on utility taxes on city-owned utilities. But these are the three main sources of revenue for operations in cities, and then there's a variety of other taxes that are imposed. I suspect most of these are B&O tax. Yeah. So, but the real point there is, again, our reliance on the property tax is a strength and a weakness at the same time. In this budget, we are assuming the 1% optional increase that the council has at its disposal. That will generate a $9 a year increase on the median household value of $700,000 in both 2013 and 14. And I want to remind the council, I did this 2 years ago, from 2009 to 2010, the typical Mercer Island homeowner received a $522 reduction in property taxes, mostly driven by the county almost decimating, getting rid of the ferry district proposal that they'd had from the past, but also changes in the property tax at the port and EMS, somewhat lower school district levy, and then just overall lower assessed valuation. So the reason I want you to remember that is the scale of what we're going to be talking about here in the utility tax proposal and utility rates, those are all like double-digit numbers at best. Some of them are single-digit. And their impacts are relatively small. But when you compare it to the decrease that occurred at these regional taxing levels a couple of years ago, this is, again, an opportunity to make investments in Mercer Island and keep those dollars home, as opposed to making investments in the region as we had in the past and have not that much service delivered to Mercer Islanders as a result. This is a chance for you to make an investment. Sales tax. Our construction sales tax made up 38% of our sales tax receipts in 2012. 6 years ago, it was 47%. When we were in the boom construction years, sales tax on construction was a big deal. It is less so now. However, the town center construction is starting to pick up, and we're predicting that by 2014 that percentage split between construction and non-construction will be about 41%. And this is what that looks like. This is overall sales tax for Mercer Island, and this is just the construction sales tax portion. The shape of these two curves is no surprise. This 2006 to 2009 bump, that is what they call the housing bubble. That is when, and you'll see this in virtually every city in the U.S., when there was a huge run-up in construction and sales and everything else, and then all of a sudden, particularly in the construction industry, it dropped off and hit a very low level in 2009 and 10, and we are just, as you can see the slope of the line, we are just slowly crawling out of what happened in the recession. Permit fees, we've had relatively flat numbers of permits, but the valuations of the projects are going up, and ultimately that's what drives the value of the permit fee. Town center activity is going up, so much so that by 2014 we predict about $210,000 a year more in permit fees than we are getting this year. Property sales are starting to pick up, and you'll see our predictions on real estate excise tax going up as a consequence. Because we are starting to see the development world on the island moving in a positive direction, we know we hit the bottom, and we still had enough work to keep our existing development services staff busy. One of those staff positions, a plans examiner, was one that we kept on a contract 2 years ago, and throughout the 2-year period, he has been consistently busy. We know now that that position is part of our base, our core development work, and we're recommending in this budget that we make that a permanent budgeted FTE. Building permits. Down below are commercial multifamily, that's the town center, and above is overall island-wide. Again, this is the housing bubble. This is remodels, and new construction, and in comparatively huge numbers, and then it's just gone relatively flat ever since. The town center is starting to pick up in its amount of activity, and all of that is helping generate a marginally better picture in terms of permit fee revenue. These are the fees themselves. We hit the bottom in 2010, and it's starting to climb up, and we predict by 2014 we'll be at $1.35 million, which is about where we were in 2003, 2004. This is the real estate excise tax graph. You'll see it again later when Noel does the CIP, but I put it in here again as just part of the story about real estate and construction on the island. That is the engine that drives the city's revenues, and again, the same housing bubble run up and then decline, and now sales are starting to pick up, home prices are starting to go up, all marginally, but in a way that actually does make a difference in our revenues. Labor costs. I said labor costs was one of the drivers. We continue to try to constrain our salary costs for both union and non-union employees. Those salaries are still marginally lower than our east side neighboring cities. We can make that work, but just want you to know we are not at the top of the market or even in the middle of the east side market. We compete with those cities, and they pay a little bit more. On healthcare costs, our employee cost sharing is among the highest in the region. I'll show you both of these things here in a couple of charts. You've seen this before. This is all 2011 data, and it's changed a little bit in 2012, but not enough to redo the chart. This shows 8 different east side cities across 6 different positions where all of these cities have these positions, or except for Sammamish is missing a couple, and what the salary, monthly salary is for each of those for an employee at 5 years. And then we compare Mercer Island to the average of this group of cities, and in each case, the Mercer Island salary is lower than the average above. Some of those averages, as I say, have gotten a little bit better because we've done a couple of things to help in a couple of key slots, key positions. But this is just to drive home the point. We're doing okay, and we still don't pay as well as everybody else. That was for the non-union employees. These are all union positions, police, fire, and AFSCME. And again, the story is similar, although not quite as dramatic. The Mercer Island average, the Mercer Island salary is still below the average for firefighters, a little bit above for police officers, and a little below for the maintenance workers. And then in terms of healthcare costs, as you can see, again, with this listing of cities, our premium cost is lower than everybody else's. The employer's share is lower than all the other cities. The employee's share or cost is the highest, and the overall percentage of employee share is the highest by significant amounts. And that's been this way for about 20 years. This is the Mercer Island style. We've always asked our employees to share in their health care costs because we just thought it was good business and also helped get good health outcomes. But again, this is the point here is it is our style to always try and keep our labor costs constrained, and arguably not unlike the way the private sector does. In this budget, we propose to provide COLAs to those, of course, the COLAs in the contracts to the represented employees, and then with the non-union employees, COLAs of at least 2.61% for 2013. We don't want them to lose any more room against the market, so we think they deserve a COLA. But we are going to, in 2013, freeze any raises or market adjustments. In 2014, I may be back and say it's time that we start to make some adjustments where we've got positions that have really fallen too far out of whack with the rest of the market. But for 2013, no raises beyond COLA. And that's also true on performance pay. We're going to take a year off on performance pay for the same reason. This is how the employees are willing to do their part in dealing with the issue of a deficit that we're facing if the council is willing to do its part on the utility tax proposal. Overall in this budget, we net out at 2.32 FTEs over and above 2012 levels. There's a proposal for an information technology technician, the communication sustainability position that you know about, and making permanent the deputy city clerk position that we authorized last year. Overall, that's our staffing table. If at first you think, wow, that's a jump there from 2010 down and then growth, remember that's starting off a base of 155. This scale probably overemphasizes the change. It's about, I think I measured about a 2% change. It's a little less than 2% change from 2012 to 2013. Overall, our expenditures are relatively flat compared to 2012 levels. There are $585,000 in reductions in the proposed 2013 budget. Almost all of that is in non-service areas. Staff costs, administrative costs, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like here in a second. We also have a proposal in here to eliminate the remaining general fund subsidies to the CIP fund and the utilities, and I'll explain what that means in a second. And then finally, a modest reduction in parks and parks maintenance. You saw this 2 years ago, and it'll be one of the things you'll get to discuss and debate. Overall, our expenditures, when the blue line is in nominal dollars, as inflation occurs, this is the slope of the line. If you adjust for inflation, and I use the CPIU index, and you'll see we are not growing. It's flat, and that's been going on for quite some time. So this is the series of slides that helps you understand how we're balancing the budget. In June, we came to you and we said roughly a $900,000 deficit. It's actually a little bit more than that when CHIP accounted for everything. And so we went about a variety of things to bring that down to zero. And I'm going to go through this line by line, not in too much detail. The first and most important one, I mentioned it a minute ago, non-service level reductions, $395,000. We are going to benefit from slightly lower than predicted liability insurance premiums from WCIA. That saved $137,000. The no pay for performance for a year saves us $60,000. We've revised our ILA with the school district for fields. Those are the elementary fields. That saves us $45,000. We've reduced police overtime by almost $28,000. We can do that in 2013. It's going to be harder in years after that because we'll start to have retirements, and retirements affect overtime. But for now, the chief is comfortable with that. We have lower left one retiree medical premiums, saving us $39,000, and we are going to propose an office reorganization in the city attorney's office that'll save us about $22,000. The judges' hours, we're proposing a slight reduction there just based on slightly lower caseload, some professional fees in solid waste programming. That doesn't reduce a service, that just reduces the cost. Some operating supplies. We are not going to index our subsidy in the community center to the CPI. We're holding it as a constant dollar. By doing that, saves us $10,000. Some city attorney's office dues and subscriptions. I don't know what Katie's going to read anymore for $8,000. And then $5,000 in rec services. So there's the $395. I should back up. The service reductions, again, are modest. This is the same thing you saw 2 years ago. We're proposing to move the park maintenance level of service from B to C. This is not quite the same as 2 years ago. I don't think we're going to have the same issues, and Jason can speak to this when we get to it. We won't have the same issues about bathroom cleaning and debate that you had 2 years ago. But in saying that, I also want to remind you that 2 years ago we reduced a half an FTE in parks, the parks manager position, summer celebration, the fireworks, and some arts programs, all of which we dealt with through donations and fundraising. At least these two we did. The parks manager position we left vacant. All of that is continuing on in this budget. Those have not been restored. So they aren't counted as reductions in the balancing of the budget, but I just wanted you to know that there's other stuff that we cut out before, and it stays that way. We want to remove some of the general fund subsidies, a total of $190,000 worth. In some of our CIP projects, the general fund is actually subsidizing the project management. So some of our facilities will have our facility person who's paid out of the general fund doing these capital projects, and that is not consistent with our overall policy that all projects should be managed out of the CIP. We also have been paying for street sweeping out of the general fund. We're using general funds in the maintenance department. In spite of the fact that street sweeping is generally considered by everybody in the business, I mean, Mike can attest to this, it's a water quality effort. It's about stormwater management and water quality. So we want to move that general fund support and the whole street sweeping cost into the utility. And then lastly, we're going to ask the YFS to once again step up, and they seem to just do this every time, reduce the general fund support to YFS by $120,000 and make up for that with new thrift shop revenue. And Cindy is confident we can do that, and that's been their track record. Service enhancements and one-time costs, those actually go the other direction. They add to the problem. Service enhancements include, and I've mentioned this, our IGS technician and the deputy city clerk, both of which would be funded out of general funds. The sustainability coordinator position would be a .4 FTE added to the .6 communications coordinator. So this is the overall cost, and that cost will be split between the general fund and the stormwater fund. We'll show you exactly how that works later in the budget. I won't do it tonight because it actually is more complicated than it looks, but overall that's the service enhancement. YFS has got a couple of positions that they want to include: production lead in the thrift shop and an administrative assistant, part-time, out at their front counter. This is something that hasn't worked in the past where they were using work-study students, and it just was not working well at all. So that one adds about $12,000. The lead about $45,000, paid for 100% out of thrift shop revenue. Parks wants to change its staffing model at the community center from largely part-time staff to a full-time person that they can recruit for. We'll talk to you about why that's important when we get to the parks budget. It's to be paid for out of increased room rental fees. And then lastly, we have a one-time cost in 2014 for the comprehensive plan, the transportation element. We'll have to go out and hire a transportation planner to do this kind of work. It's pretty technical, and that'll be paid for out of sewer lake line savings. Then in the utilities, two things are going on, and I'll talk first about the lower one. I've mentioned the sustainability coordinator position partially funded out of the stormwater utility. That will require the stormwater utility to increase its cost by $40,529, and the rate increase in the stormwater fund will help pay for that. That's about 2.3% of the rate increase. I think the rate increase was in the 5.1% area. And then the other much larger proposal, again, is what we talked about in June, and that's the utility tax applied to city utilities. Back then we proposed, as I said, about a 50-50 split, $425,000 in 2013 and $625,000 in 2014. Under state law, there's a little bit about the utility tax. Under state law, cities can apply up to 6% on all of the various utilities: electricity, gas, telephone, cable TV, garbage, and I'm probably missing one. They can be higher than that with voter approval. Well, here's the list. In Washington, 188 cities apply a utility tax to some kind of utility, and then on the publicly owned utilities of water, sewer, and stormwater, you can see the numbers of cities that apply a tax to them. So it's very, very common in the state of Washington. In King County, there are 16 cities that tax their public utilities with rates ranging from 15.5% in Seattle to 5% in Bothell. The average rate is 7.1%. Our proposed rate is 3.4% in 2013 and 5% in 2014, and those rates will generate the dollars that I mentioned here at the top. I went back and did a little research, because I'd sort of remembered this back when I first started with the city. The city used to apply the utility tax to its water and sewer utility. We didn't have a stormwater utility back in the 80s, but pre-1986, the city levied a 2.4% utility tax on water and sewer. At that same time, in 1986, the council reset all the rates on all the other private utilities to 6%. They had been higher than that, and they brought them down to 6% pursuant to state law, a change in the law. And at that time, they took off the tax on water and sewer. That's at least in part because the council in the 80s was reliant on the property tax when they had the authority to go up to 6% increase per year. It was a 106% property tax limit. And they balanced the budget using the property tax more so than the utility tax. That went on for 30 years until referendum 747 was passed in 2001. And that's when the property tax got limited down to 1% and sort of put the skids on the property tax being the place where you balance the budget. So in one sense, going back to the utility tax on our own utilities is only, it's almost a natural consequence of what happened after referendum 747 because it constrained the property tax to be the place where the budgets will be balanced. In any case, our proposal, 3.4% in 2013, 5% in 2014. It will overall be 1.7% of the general fund budget in terms of revenue. It's only 35% of that budget deficit that we are currently facing. So you had said go as far up as high as 50. We are not up to 50 in either year. The monthly impact would be $4.25 in 2013 with an annual impact of about $51. Then the next piece was the property tax. We do this every year, or we propose it. $106,000 of new revenue, a $9 per median household impact. And again, I remind about the decrease in 2010. And then room rental rates going up in the community center, about $15,000. We talked about this at the Parks and Rec Subcommittee, and Jana's proposal somewhat shaped in those conversations, but we're proposing we go forward with it. Thrift shop increase in sales, $120,000. And then finally, we are proposing to balance the budget using cash carried over from the end of this year of $140,000 for 2013, and the next year a carryover of $167,000. We'll talk to you a little bit later in the next month and a half. Those numbers actually can come down because we just got some good news on Friday that our medical premium costs are going to be about $100,000 less than we thought. So we can reduce this cash contribution just because we just found another $100,000 savings. So that gets us down to zero. I'm going to stop now. Throat's going dry. I'll let Chip walk you through the utility rates, and then Noel on CIP, and we'll be done.
Good evening. I'll be quick. Don't worry. I know it's a long presentation.
We do this every 2 years.
As a matter of perspective, a reminder, a number of you, this is old hat, but when the rates are developed every 2 years, 6 years worth of rates are developed. Francie doesn't. She's our utility queen, and she does a great job. These are complex models, especially the water rate model. And this isn't throwing darts. We're really trying to be very thoughtful about these. And there's things that happen outside of our control, of course, but we really try to pay particular attention to all 6 years. And the philosophy I have is we try to smooth our rates as much as possible. There's certain things that happen, like last year, SPU, jacking up our water by 35%. We were able to absorb that and keep the overall impact on residents pretty minimal overall, but nevertheless, those things do happen. So with that, let's talk about water first. The recommendation, this will go to the utility board next week on Tuesday. We're recommending an 8% increase. In terms of a point of comparison, 2 years ago, what was projected was an 8.25% increase. So we've got it whittled down just a little bit. What's driving it? Primarily capital, but also water consumption has just, it keeps coming down, and it hasn't been significant. And of course, we haven't had the weather to justify watering your lawn until this year. And that's important because, and a lot of folks don't understand this, a lot of our costs in the water utility, they're not variable, they're fixed. okay? And the rate structure is set up so it's really tied heavily to consumption. And so when consumption it doesn't hit what we're projecting that the budget's based on, then we're not bringing in the full amount of revenue that we really need to cover our costs. So that's also a piece that's driving it. But it is primarily capital. The impact on a bi-monthly bill for your average single-family resident is $5.64. Sewer, this has gone before the utility board, and it's a unanimous recommendation. That's a 9.5% increase in the city portion that we're responsible for. There's also a pass-through portion from King County for sewage treatment. You can attribute a lot of that, not all of it, to Brightwater. That's a significant 10.2% increase. You blend them together, and it was, what, 9.8, 9.9, just under 10, taken together. Roughly, both pieces are around 50% of the bill, the city portion and the pass-through portion. We were projecting 2 years ago for 13 to 14, a 9.5% increase, so we were able to stick with that projection. The bi-monthly impact is $13.21. Stormwater. What was projected 2 years ago is a 3.1% increase. So what's driving the additional 2% for the 5.1% increase is the capital program to a much lesser extent. It's really about the shift of street sweeping costs from general fund to the stormwater fund and the sustainability coordinator position, okay? Which that piece of the position as it's envisioned, and we'll get into this further, we're proposing a 50-50 split between public communications, sustainability. That sustainability half of the position would be split 50-50, or a quarter of an FTE to general fund, a quarter of an FTE to the stormwater fund. The impact, $1.53 per bi-monthly bill. Finally, EMS rates, you're going 12.7%. What in the name of whatever is going on here? This is an odd utility, and we're very unusual. It's tied to the cost of 4 firefighters hired back in 1996. And we go through this, what I call a true-up adjustment, about every 2 years. And the reason that happens is because typically in in-between year, we're only adjusting it for inflation. And it's been also, there's been this lag. And so I'm trying to fix this going forward. And so there's only a 1 year lag, and we're always tying it to what those actual costs are. And this is an average. This excludes overtime, but average salary and benefit costs for 4 firefighters. And so this is our biennial true-up, and it's substantial. And that's in part because of the fire contract that was approved recently.
It's only 91 cents.
It's only 91 cents, but I'm sensitive to the percentage increase. And so I don't take that for granted. The utility board will review this also along with the water rates next week on Tuesday. Combined, these are the perspective slides. When you take all these utilities together, the 4, look at the 2013 column, it's going up by 8.8%. It's what's recommended. Okay, that's relative to a 5.9% increase last year. I should say this year, approved last year, and then a 5.5% increase is proposed for 2014. You can see the bi-monthly impact, $21.29, a little over $10 a month is the proposed impact. When you look at us, we did this for the council 2 years ago as well, take an average of all the King County cities and utility districts and compare it to Mercer Island for water, sewer, and stormwater. They don't have EMS utilities, the most of them, so we exclude that to keep an apples-to-apples comparison. You can see that we are about $35, $36 less. That's 13.5% less than the King County average. Quite honestly, I was shocked by that. 2 years ago, we were almost right at the King County average, so there's been some movement amongst other cities. I'm shocked because of what I said at the dashboard report last council meeting. We have old stuff compared to lots of other cities, old infrastructure, and it's coming due for replacement. A lot of them have lots of newer neighborhoods in the last 20 years, and so they're not having the kind of problems that we are and not having the immediate need, relatively speaking, to replace that significant infrastructure. And with that, I'm done with utilities, and I'll invite Noel up.
Good evening, Noel Treat, Deputy City Manager. As Rich mentioned earlier, one of the assigned roles of the deputy is to help oversee the capital improvement program. And due to the timing of when I started, as well as the vacancy we had in the DSG director role, these are these are some duties I'm just now jumping into. So as we move forward, you'll see me more and more involved in CIP issues and questions. I want to give you a quick introduction to the capital improvement program portion of the budget. First, just to set the planning and budgeting context, as you'll see in the budget documents, CIP is planned over a 6-year period. However, you're only appropriating in 2-year increments. So what you'll approve and appropriate in this budget cycle is only for the next 2 years, 2013, 2014. I want to touch on the REIT forecast quickly. As you know, that's an important and significant component of funding for our streets, pedestrian bicycle facilities, as well as parks and open space. And I'll put that REIT chart back up here in a minute. And then after that, I'll quickly give you some project highlights from some of the key capital projects that we've got planned. Overall, as you'll see when you dive into this detail in the coming months, this is mainly a capital budget that's based on maintaining existing assets, not a lot of new stuff. So here again is the REIT chart. Looking backwards, you can see that like our other revenue sources, the housing bubble and the recession really created a significant hit to our revenue source. Things are starting to come back. We aren't seeing a return yet to the average housing prices that we saw previously, but we are seeing growing numbers of home sales that help drive this revenue. For instance, I think back in 2008, there were only about 260 home sales on the island, and we're projecting for 2012 to end at 400 or more. You saw this forecast back in June, and this is the same forecast you saw then. When we get up to the CIP portion of the budget in November, Rich and his team, or Chip and his team, will do a revised forecast, get you the most up-to-date revenue figures we have, and we'll use that to finalize the budget. The good news is that every indication is that we're going to be at least as good as this forecast, if not somewhat better. We're aware of some significant sales that may close in coming months, so we think we're going to be at least here, if not have a little bit more in REIT revenue as the year comes to a close. And then jumping into some project highlights, in terms of funded projects, you've got the Luther Burbank playground replacement. That's one where we'll certainly include a good component of public input as we move forward in deciding on final design. You've got Island Crest Way resurfacing. That's Phase 2 from Marymount to Southeast 40th. You've got what's Phase 8 of the continuing East Mercer Shoulders project. You've got a new bike path bike lane heading down to the Island Park Elementary on 62nd. We're continuing the Safe Routes to Schools program that's gone on for a couple years past, as well as the ongoing residential street overlay projects. We've got annual building repairs and maintenance. We have a host of scheduled vehicle replacements, including police patrol vehicles. In sewer and drinking water, we've got a host of projects to continue to maintain those systems. In water quality, we're doing a couple new things. One is we're going to begin installing some water treatment devices, which will help clean stormwater before it enters the lake. And we have a variety of drainage subbasin improvements planned as well. Other projects include, of course, the replacement of Fire Station 92, which is contingent on the November levy vote. We're creating a sustainability investment fund with $50,000 in seed money. The concept there, again, of course, is that money will be used towards projects that will have or hope to have some type of return on that investment, such as energy efficiency projects. That savings will be tracked and then placed back in this fund for future sustainability projects. Following some of the direction Council provided at the CIP preview, we've included funding for a mini master planning process for the thrift shop in Mercerdale Park to help us think through options for thrift shop expansion, as well as how to coordinate that with the park improvements. And this is another one where we'll also be looking for some citizen and community input to make sure that we get this off on the right track. And then finally, there's a host of technology projects, computer replacements, and also, as you've heard previously, some key software and system upgrades. And with that, I will hand it back to Rich.
Noel, if you'd stay there and just click as I talk, I'll just stay here. So I'm going to walk you really quickly through the next few weeks. It'll be By department, again, as I said, this is something we did 2 years ago and you liked, and then we'll go back through the CIP, looking at changes that have occurred since the June preview. On the 15th, 2 weeks from now, we'll focus on operating departments, city attorney, city council, city manager's office, development services, and you can read it for yourself. The 22nd, continue with those operating budget departments, and then on the 5th, we go to revenues, and looking at property tax, utility rates, the other major revenue sources, and then finalize any changes that came up out of the previous 2 meetings, and start to prepare for the 19th, where you're talking about the CIP, and we have to do something for NORCOM, just an annual budget resolution, and then adopt property tax and utility rates. So it's short in terms of numbers of meetings, a lot to go over, and consistent with what you asked us to do when we talked to you about this in June. So that's it. Anybody still awake? My predecessor, my mentor, used to say that is the standard for success for a city manager, is if you can get it on consent. I still have yet to do that. So. But he just pull it off consent, though. I mean, yes. Well, thank you, Chip, Noel, and Rich. That was well done in blazing through a lot of material and giving us a nice succinct look at what's coming. So we appreciate that.
So Allie, what is the clip art?
I had nothing to do with that clip art. 'Cause that's 1990-something. And
how about the first page? Was that yours?
yeah, that's the sustainability money people. You can see there's windmills and clouds and trees and people holding hands.
They're all just received something from the utility assistance program, and they're holding their hands.
Our names on this? Did you get Mike a special one that shows no tax?
It's looking good. It's looking good. Okay. Do you have more?
No, we are done with the budget message. If there's any questions about, specifically what we said, be happy to answer them quickly. Otherwise, I'd say hold your fodder. We'll write down your questions that just went through your mind and ask them over the next 4 meetings.
Okay. Everybody able to hold fire for now? And all right, very good. Thank you for that. We now move to other business. Councilmember absences. There are none tonight, or are there any upcoming that we're not yet aware of? Debbie?
Partial. I will be late to the meeting on October 22nd.
Can you talk into your microphone? Sorry.
I will be late to the meeting on October 22nd, probably arriving 7:30, 7:45.
Anything else? Okay.
Other business, you said?
We're on planning schedule now.
Well, other business?
Well, okay. Yeah, we're
I
working.
think that's what you were talking
We're
about.
working through it.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Okay. Planning schedule. You're throwing me, Mike, here. I'm expecting a zinger at some point. Rich, you want to talk planning schedule? I mean, we really just kind of most of it.
There's not much to say. I think what you see here is all going to stand still. The one thing that we might add, as you've all seen on the doodle request that I sent out, would be a Saturday or a Sunday session, hopefully by the end of the year, on Town Center. I don't have the date yet. It's starting to look like the dates further out are more likely to happen than the ones closest in, but I'll try and fix that as soon as I can. We've got a lot of responses, so I think by the end of this week we should be able to pin it down.
So Rich, the other items to be scheduled, most of these are going to slip to 2013, is that the theory?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are.
I mean, it raises the question whether we need one more. I mean, this is a larger list than I think I can ever recall going into a new year. And I mean, obviously, some of these we're not going to knock off in a night. The shoreline thing clearly is not a night for, not a one-night thing, but...
Actually, that, we will...
That one pushes anyway, right?
We just put that on the list last meeting, and the hope was just to, it'd probably have to wait, because the DOE has pushed their meeting into November, so that's probably going to be a January thing. Now, Dan, the things that...
I mean, for example, we only have one meeting scheduled in December, and it's, at least the council should think about whether if we want to try to knock some of these off, would like, I mean, I understand not doing the 17th because that's running into vacations, but if we wanted to think about a meeting on the 10th, for example, to try to do some of this so we don't start the year so far behind, if staff can get ready.
Let me see if we can get ready, because some of these things have been here literally for a long time, and it's because the issue isn't ready on the other end. The staff are dealing with, people like Comcast and people like PSC. Let me see.
I got to chime up. The reason we have this is because it was a conscious decision by the council to skip those summer meetings. And I, for one, in December, I don't want to schedule anything in December that I don't have to. We'll just do it the good old-fashioned government way and kick the can down the road a little bit. I see no problem with that. Plus, you throw in another council meeting there, and it disrupts the flow and the cycle of the staff. So I, for one, don't want you to push too hard on getting this stuff on another meeting.
But I point out, Mike, that December 17th is a regularly scheduled council meeting. So it's our affirmative decision to cancel that meeting that you're assuming has already been made. Right now, we only have one meeting in December. Technically, we're supposed to have...
We always cancel that meeting.
Well, that doesn't mean we always have to cancel that meeting.
We always cancel that meeting, and the reason
But doesn't mean we have to. We're supposed to work twice a month.
I hear you, Mike. It would be a council decision, right, to do.
And which of these items are the most pressing?
Well,
I mean, some...
No, I'm thinking, Jane, my only point is that if staff can get them ready in their half-hour items, so we could just knock them off the list, it would be nice to do that. But that's...
Let me pledge this, because I don't know the answer to when we can get them ready. Let me pledge that at our next meeting, I will have as many of those scheduled to a meeting as soon as we can reasonably do it. And hopefully that'll be by the end of the year. If not, it'll be at the beginning of the year, but they're going to get off this list. But the date is less of a concern to me. The fact that they've stayed on this list as long as they've had, that's what concerns me. And so that's what I want to do, is get them off this list and get them scheduled to a meeting date.
Which be respectful of our half-life at 10 o'clock and, not throw these things on.
I have a rule, I don't schedule more than 4 regular business items in a night, because it gets beyond that and gets too late. Okay?
Yeah. So speaking of, for the October 15th meeting, we already have a 3.5 hours of scheduled activity. And October 15th, which seems like a lot, given that we often go over our allotted time. Is there some way we can either start earlier on the evening, or I know we're having...
We can do a study session if you want. I think that's available now. And what we would do is, in fact, we had talked about doing this, having the emergency management update and the communities that care update actually like sharing a half an hour each of a study session.
Isn't the emergency management update, obviously you have it scheduled, but is it on the 19th? There's the special earthquake drill. Does it make sense to do that before versus after?
Oh, that's not what Jennifer was coming to talk about. She was coming to talk to you about council's role in an emergency. But if there's some update stuff that she can tell you about that relates to the drill. Yeah, let's do that.
Because earlier, I think, is better than,
We had that way originally, and then I changed it, and I'm trying to remember why I changed that. You remember, Ally?
Because we didn't have the flood control agreement on there, and so it was just going to be budget and those two items.
That's what it is. You're right.
Okay, so 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock for those two.
Good. Anything else? All right, board appointments. We have none. Council member reports. Mr. Grady.
Well, last meeting, I mentioned the meeting with Kirkland to combine our green teams, and so I have since participated in the Kirkland Triathlon, and so we're going to organize a challenge for next year, because we have a farm triathlon here on Mercer Island, and so I'm going to challenge the council from Kirkland and here to participate next year, and at the one in Kirkland, and then the combined score wins. And I'm not sure what the prize is yet, but we'll figure that out later. And that's it. Thank you.
Could knock out entire councils all at once with that.
See, that way we could practice our emergency management response.
For all those,
Your CPR training.
heart attacks.
Call 911 while we're...
Debbie. Donna.
just this coming Sunday, if I'm not wrong, is the last farmer's market of the year.
I think that could be.
So just want to encourage people to come to the last farmer's market of the year. And I have to say, it is amazing. We were doing an extremely informal, I dare say, poll, but it's amazing how many non-Mercer Island residents come to the farmer's market. So it is definitely an economic driver.
Very good. Dan? Nothing. Jane?
Nope.
Mike?
No.
Okay, and I have nothing, but do you have something else?
Well, then I do if you're not going to have anything. I think the mayor is going to speak tomorrow.
The mayor will be at the Rotary Club luncheon tomorrow, and he hopefully will have something coherent to say.
I'm sure he will.
He's not quite sure yet what that will be, so the chances of coherency are not that high.
You want my notes? What some of my
No, not so much. All right. With that, is there anything else for the good of the order? All right, with that, thank you all. We are adjourned.